Chapter 423. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong didn't wait for the elevator to come down. He ran up the stairs by himself. In a short while he rushed to the 19th floor. Before he could find Chow Kefi in Lu Feier's room, he shouted in the corridor, "President Chow, President Chow. Lu Feier, where are you?" Li Yundong's shout alarmed the entire floor. Some curious people leaned out of the door and muttered to themselves, "Lu Feier? Is it that big star Lu Feier?" While they were guessing, they saw a door suddenly open and a girl ran out. She was wearing a bathrobe and her hair was disheveled. She waved at Li Yundong with a panicked expression and shouted, "Li Yundong, I'm here. President Chow is dying. Come quickly." Li Yundong immediately rushed toward her and asked anxiously, "What's going on? Where's President Chow?" Lu Feier didn't care that she had been discovered. She pulled Li Yundong and pointed to the room. Her voice was filled with fear and a strong sob. She said, "I don't know what's going on. When I came out of the shower, Chow was like this." Li Yundong walked into the room and saw that it was a spacious and luxurious double room. The double room was equipped with all kinds of appliances, and it was also equipped with a bathroom and a balcony. 7 km. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the balcony were open, and the curtains fluttered gently in the night wind outside. The bedside lamp between the two beds was slightly lit, and the faint light outlined Chow Kefi's figure. She was lying on a bed, her eyes closed, her hands tightly covering her chest, and her face full of pain. Li Yundong rushed to her side and felt her pulse with his hand. He found that her pulse was extremely weak, almost as if it didn't exist. Li Yundong tried her breathing with his hand again and found that she was completely out of breath. Li Yundong's heart tightened. He asked in a deep voice, "Do you know that President Chow has heart disease?" Lu Feier saw that Li Yundong's expression was calm and composed. She was slightly relieved and said, "I know." Li Yundong asked, "Then why didn't you give her medicine?" Lu Feier said with tears in her eyes, "I did, but she couldn't swallow it. I gave her water, but it was useless." Li Yundong frowned. "Have you called 110 yet? Where's 120? Lu Feier wiped her tears and shook her head. "No, when I came out, Sister Chow was still conscious. I saw her clutching her chest in pain, so I thought she had a heart attack. I quickly found medicine for her. After I fed it to her, she struggled and said that someone wanted to kill her. She asked me to find you quickly and said that you could save her." Li Yundong frowned. He saw that there was not only a pool of water beside Chow Kefi, but also a few drops of blood not far away. He dipped one hand in the blood and sniffed it. He pressed Chow Kefi's pulse with the other hand and asked in a deep voice, "Did she say who wanted to kill her?" Lu Feier shook her head. "Did you see the murderer?" Li Yundong asked. Lu Feier shook her head desperately. Her eyes were full of fear as if to say, "If I saw it, wouldn't I be lying here too?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and asked, "Do you have any enemies?" Lu Feier shook her head and said, "No." Li Yundong said, "Think about it. I mean, some very special enemies like me who have a little special ability." Lu Feier couldn't help but sob again. Sister Chow is usually kind to others. How could she have any enemies? Li Yundong asked, "But didn't I see someone collect a debt from her last time?" Lu Feier said, "Sister Chow has already paid off that debt." Li Yundong fell silent. He slowly transferred Yuanyang Qi to Chow Kefi's body, trying to help her hang on to the last breath of life. He asked again, "No, didn't you come back to Tianan City in private? Who else knows your whereabouts?" Lu Feier said bitterly, "The crew may know that we returned to Tianan City, but they shouldn't know where we live." Li Yundong frowned. He was about to ask again when he saw Lu Feier suddenly sob, "Hurry up and save President Chow. Can you save her?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, she's fine, but..." Li Yundong was about to tell her about Chow Kefi's current situation when he suddenly heard a noise coming from outside. "What? Lu Feier is here? Where? Where?" The tourists outside were alarmed. When some fans heard about Lu Feier's whereabouts, they immediately surrounded her and craned their heads to look around at the door. Some people pointed at Lu Feier's figure and shouted, "Yes, it's Lu Feier. Ah, Lu Feier, I love you. Lu Feier, give me an autograph. I love watching your movies and TV shows." Lu Feier had dealt with countless fans, but obviously she had never dealt with her own fans in such a situation. She was stunned for a moment, at a loss, and didn't know what to do. If she agreed, they would destroy the scene if they came in. Moreover, how could she deal with these fanatical fans in such a situation? But if she didn't agree, if the matter got out, there would be unfavorable news and gossip about her. Lu Feier's face was dull. She stood like a clay puppet, watching the fans rush toward her like a tide. Just as she was about to be surrounded by these fans, Li Yundong suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Stop!" Although this low shout was not loud, it was full of majesty and power, causing these fans to stop in their tracks and stand still. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young man squatting by the bed, looking at them coldly, like a lion looking down at 100 beasts. His face was indifferent and there was no expression on his face, but between his eyebrows, there was a natural pressure that came from not being angry. Li Yundong said angrily, "Someone is going to die here. Didn't you notice? Get out of here. If someone dies, will you be responsible?" Only then did these people come to their senses. They looked at the beautiful Chow Kefi lying on the bed, and then at the panicked Lu Feier. Finally their eyes fell on the young and handsome Li Yundong. Countless imaginative stories suddenly appeared in their minds, and then countless erotic and ambiguous gossip and anecdotes emerged. Chinese people loved to join in on the fun. When these guys saw such a fascinating thing happening at this time, they immediately became excited. Although they didn't dare to go forward, they didn't retreat either. One by one they piled up at the door and excitedly took pictures with their mobile phones. Li Yundong frowned and said to Lu Feier in a deep voice, "Drive them all out." Lu Feier was stunned and asked, What? Li Yundong glared at her and said, "Do you want President Chow to die? Hurry up and drive them all out." Lu Feier seemed to wake up from a dream. She begged the crowd, "Could you please make way? I'll definitely sign autographs for you later." These people all smiled and promised, but their feet seemed to be rooted to the ground and they didn't move at all. Lu Feier was so anxious that tears welled up in her eyes. She was about to speak again when she suddenly heard a woman shouting her name outside. Lu Feier was stunned and subconsciously shouted, "Sister Hong? I'm here." After a while, a tall woman wearing a black professional suit and a pair of black-rimmed glasses squeezed in from the crowd. The moment the woman saw Lu Feier, her face immediately revealed a strong expression of anger. However, she looked left and right, then forcefully suppressed her anger. She just walked up to Lu Feier and said in a low voice, "Feier, you've gone too far this time. How dare you sneak away from the crew? Do you know how bad the impact is? Now the whole crew is saying that you're acting like a big shot." When Lu Feier saw that the woman was her agent, Sister Hong, she immediately rushed over as if she had seen her savior. She took her hand and asked in surprise, "Sister Hong, how did you find me?" Seeing that she didn't answer her question, Sister Hong snorted coldly and temporarily put the previous matter behind her. "I have my own way. But where is Chow Kefi? How could she be such a B*****starred? It's fine if she ran away by herself, but why did she drag you away? Where is she?" Lu Feier pointed at Chow Kefi, who was lying on the bed with a worried expression, and said sadly, "Someone wants to kill Sister Chow. She's dying now." Sister Hong was shocked, but she still said rudely, "This woman is the best at causing trouble. Humph, this is her retribution." Lu Feier pulled her arm and whispered, "Sister Hong, don't say anything. I wanted to come out with Sister Chow. It's not her fault." Sister Hong glared at her and said, "You're still speaking for her." Lu Feier's tears were about to fall again. She choked and said, "Don't say anything. If you want to scold someone, scold me. It's all my fault that Sister Chow ended up like this." The anger between Sister Hong's eyebrows dissipated a little. She glanced at Li Yundong, who was concentrating on transferring Jinchi to Chow Kefi, and asked, "Who is this person?" Lu Feier whispered, "Sister Chow's friend." Sister Hong frowned. "What friend?" Lu Feier hesitated for a moment before saying, "Just an ordinary friend." Sister Hong asked, "Is he a doctor?" Lu Feier was tongue-tied. "I don't know." Sister Hong frowned. She said to Li Yundong, "Hey, are you a doctor?" Li Yundong didn't even turn his head as he said lightly, "No." Sister Hong suddenly said angrily, "If you're not a doctor, what are you doing here? Do you know that it will kill someone? When Chow Kefi really dies, who will be responsible for it? You or someone else? Hey, say something. Hurry up and get out of the way. If you're not a doctor, what are you doing? Hey. Li Yundong tilted his head slightly, glanced at the agent lightly and said, "Then why don't you find someone else to treat her?" Hearing this, Sister Hong was stunned, but soon she became angry and said, "Who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me like this?" She quickly took out her mobile phone from her bag and said angrily to Lu Feier, "Did you call the ambulance?" Lu Feier was sandwiched in the middle. She looked at Li Yundong in a dilemma and then at her agent. She shook her head helplessly. Sister Hong glared at her fiercely. Just as she was about to make the call, she suddenly heard someone shouting outside, "I'm a doctor, I'm a doctor." Sister Hong was overjoyed when she heard this. She shoved the phone into Lu Feier's hand and said quickly, "Hurry up and call the ambulance. Don't let this unknown guy make things worse. If we don't manage to save him, we'll all be in trouble." As she spoke, she quickly walked up to the crowd and shouted, "Who is the doctor?" At this time, a tall young man walked out of the crowd and said with a smile, "I'm a doctor." As he said this, he took out his certificate from his pocket and said, "This is my medical certificate." Sister Hong glanced at it and asked in surprise, "You graduated from Harvard University?" The young man quickly glanced at Lu Feier, then quickly hid his astonished eyes carefully. He said with a smile, "Yes, I'm a doctor of pharmacology and neurology at Harvard University. Now I'm working at North Carolina State Hospital. I know a little about medicine, so I think I can help." Sister Hong suddenly showed a big smile on her face. She giggled and said, "You only know a little about medicine? Haha, you're really modest, unlike some people who pretend to know what they don't know and cause trouble." As she said this, Sister Hong turned her head and glared at Li Yundong. The young man smiled and asked in a gentlemanly manner, "Can I go in and have a look?" The agent, Sister Hong, quickly made way for him and said with a smile, "Of course, of course." The young man walked to Li Yundong's side and unconsciously glanced at Lu Feier. He coughed and asked, "Hello, can I have a look? I'm a doctor, a professional doctor." Li Yundong looked up at him and asked lightly, "Do you know what's going on with her now? Is she alive or dead?" The young man suddenly became angry. He thought to himself, "You're obviously not a doctor. Why are you pretending? Is it possible that I, a double doctor who graduated from Harvard Medical School, am inferior to a Mongolian doctor like you? Who do you think you are? How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? You're really reciting filial piety in front of Confucius and playing tricks in front of Guan Yu." There were a lot of social engagements, so the update was late. Sorry. Chapter 424. Go to WatchNet. Li Yundong's casual words were meant to test the other party's medical skills, but for the proud and arrogant young returnee, he felt a little choked. WatchNet. 7 KOM. He was so angry that he subconsciously wanted to refute, but as soon as the words were about to come out of his mouth, he became alert. He secretly glanced at Lu Feier and thought, "This bastard has no manners. I'm a top student from Harvard University in the United States. I can't lower myself to his level." The young returnee straightened his clothes and asked with a polite smile on his face, "If you don't let me see, how do I know if she's alive or dead?" Beside him, his agent, Sister Hong, looked at him and secretly praised him. As expected of someone who has been educated abroad, he is really well educated. As she thought about it, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at Li Yundong and think to herself, unlike some Chinese people, they really have no manners. It clearly had nothing to do with him, yet he insisted on getting involved. Could it be that he didn't know that he was the one who got involved and lost his face? Li Yundong glanced at the young returnee and suddenly asked, "What's your surname?" There was a hint of arrogance and superiority in the young returnee's reserved manner. He was like a city man who had seen the world looking at a rustic country bumpkin. He said, "My name is Howard D. Smith." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Well, Mr. Sher, since you are a doctor, come and have a look." The proud and reserved smile on Mr. Sher's face suddenly froze. He blurted out, "It's Mr. Smith, not Mr. Sher." Li Yundong nodded with a smile and said, "I know, Mr. Sher." Lu Feier, who was standing to one side, saw Li Yundong teasing the fake foreigner. For some reason, she suddenly thought of Li Yundong's appearance as a waiter in the tea house and suddenly burst into laughter. When she smiled, both the fake foreigner and her agent, Sister Hong, looked at her in surprise, as if they didn't understand how she could still smile in such a situation. Lu Feier also realized that there was something wrong with her. She quickly turned her face away and lowered her head. Her face was tense as if her mother had died, but her eyes kept slipping over to Li Yundong's face from time to time. Although she had been very scared and flustered, she found that Li Yundong had been very calm, especially in this situation. He could even make fun of this fake foreign devil with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. He must have a way, right? Even though she hadn't known Li Yundong for a long time, Lu Feier always felt that there was an inexplicable power in this boy that made her feel at ease. Mr. Sher was a little embarrassed by Lu Feier's sneer. He stared at Li Yundong unkindly and said, "I'm a doctor. Let me see her condition." Li Yundong let go of one of Chow Kefi's hands and said, "Please." The fake foreigner frowned and said, "I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. I don't know how to feel a pulse." Li Yundong looked at him strangely. "Western medicine also feels the pulse on the wrist. Don't you know how to do it?" The fake foreigner's face turned a little red. He glared at Li Yundong and reached out to touch the main artery on Chow Kefi's neck. After feeling it for a while, he suddenly exclaimed, "God, she has no pulse." Li Yundong suddenly laughed. "God, so you know how to feel a pulse?" The fake foreigner said angrily, "Are you making fun of me? This person has no pulse. We need to do chest compressions and artificial respiration as soon as possible." The smile on Li Yundong's face slowly disappeared. He looked at the fake foreigner with a little sympathy and said, "Forget it, Mr. Sure. Let me do it." "You can't do it." When the fake foreigner heard this, he immediately forgot his manners. He said angrily, "What did you say? I can't do it? I have a double doctorate in medicine from Harvard University. What are you? Do you have a medical qualification? Do you know how to treat diseases and save people? This is a life and you can't afford it. Get out of the way. If you don't know medicine, don't make trouble." The agent, Sister Hong, also said to Li Yundong with a cold face, "Hey, you, get out of the way. Why can't you talk sense? Summer insects can't talk about ice. Do you know what medicine is? Do you know what's going on with Chow Kefi? She was born with heart disease. Get out of the way. If she really dies, you will have to bear criminal responsibility." The fake foreigner also threatened, "If you don't get out of the way, you will be responsible for the safety of this person's life. You will spend the rest of your life in prison." Li Yundong glanced at him and sighed helplessly. "You think you know it very well, but do you know what's going on with her?" The fake foreigner sneered and said, "Are you deaf? Didn't you hear that it's a heart attack? Heart disease needs to be treated as soon as possible, and the room needs to be ventilated. Now her heart has stopped beating. One more second of delay is a kind of murder." Li Yundong shook his head and said, "No, she doesn't have a heart attack." The fake foreigner laughed and said, "Then what is it?" Li Yundong's hand still did not let go of Chow Kefi's wrist. He kept sending Yuanyang qi into her body to maintain the vitality in her body. He said, "I just found that Chow Kefi's innate soul is missing. Normal people have 3 souls and 7 spirits, but she only has 1 soul and 3 spirits. It is precisely because of the congenital lack of soul that she has a congenital lack of qi in blood, which leads to her heart disease. Furthermore, the rest of her soul has already been scattered by someone. Her soul is currently wandering outside, causing her physical body to have almost no life force." When Li Yundong said this, the agent, Sister Hong, and the fake foreigner couldn't help laughing. Sister Hong laughed and said, "I'm dying of laughter. What era are we in? There are actually people who talk about such superstitious things. 3 souls and 7 spirits. What a joke. You don't know medicine, but you really don't know it. How dare you fool us with such things that can fool children? Hey, then tell me, which soul and 3 spirits does Chow Kefi have?" Li Yundong didn't seem to notice Sister Hong's sarcasm and mockery. He said seriously, "The 3 souls of a person are the heaven soul, the earth soul, and the life soul. There are 7 spirits. The first spirit is Tianchong, the second spirit is wisdom, the third spirit is qi, the fourth spirit is strength, the fifth spirit is the center, the sixth spirit is the essence, and the seventh spirit is the spirit." Among the 3 souls, Chow Kefi only had the life soul before. The heaven soul and the earth soul were not in her body. Among the 7 spirits, the qi, the power, the essence, the heroic, and the 4 spirits were not in her body. Sister Hong sneered and said, "You actually said it so logically. It's a pity that summer insects can't talk about ice. I didn't know that you were so young, but why are you more superstitious than an old man?" The fake foreigner couldn't help but sneer and say, "Hey, are you still living in the Qing dynasty? Where's your braid?" Li Yundong was furious in his heart. In the past, if Li Yundong had used all his strength to glare at the person in front of him, he would have been able to make his heart beat violently and make him spit out a mouthful of blood. But at this time, not only had Li Yundong's cultivation improved, but his temperament had also slowly been tempered. He just glanced at the fake foreigner lightly. Although it was just a faint glance, Li Yundong, who had experienced several battles and all kinds of hardships, had already cultivated a dignified aura. The fake foreigner's laughter was choked in his throat, and he didn't dare to say anything more. Li Yundong didn't bother to pay any more attention to him and the manager. He let go of Chow Kefi's wrist and placed his palm on the Baihui acupoint on the top of Chow Kefi's head. His other hand reached out and unbuttoned Chow Kefi's collar, revealing a large area of snow-white skin. Seeing this, Sister Hong couldn't help but ask angrily, "What do you want to do?" The fake foreigner looked at the attractive ravine on Chow Kefi's chest and couldn't help but feel a little dazzled for a moment. However, when he heard Sister Hong's scolding, he immediately came to his senses. He took a step forward and asked like a parrot, "What are you doing?" Li Yundong didn't look back. He snorted and said, "Watch carefully." As he said this, all the Jinchi in his body rushed from his palm to Chow Kefi's body. His other hand was like a butterfly flying through flowers, and his 5 fingers quickly poked at various acupoints on Chow Kefi's chest. The fake foreigner wanted to step forward to stop Li Yundong, but he was shocked by Li Yundong's power and didn't dare to move forward. The same was true for Sister Hong. She turned her head and said angrily to Lu Feier in a low voice, "Where did this man come from? How did he know you were here?" Lu Feier was speechless. Seeing this, Sister Hong couldn't help but say angrily, "Did you call him here?" Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Lu Feier bit her lip and nodded gently. Sister Hong suddenly went crazy and said angrily, "How did you know such a person? Did Chow Kefi introduce you to him? Why did you think of calling him here?" Lu Feier quickly explained, "No, Sister Hong. It was President Chow who asked me to find him. Moreover, he is very powerful, really very powerful. I saw it with my own eyes." Sister Hong suddenly turned around, pointed at Li Yundong and said angrily, "Is that so? Playing tricks like a witch?" As she spoke, she saw Li Yundong's palm press on Chow Kefi's head. He didn't seem to exert much force, but Chow Kefi slowly stood up by herself. However, her eyes were still closed, her face was as thin as paper, and her skin was frighteningly pale, without a trace of blood. For a moment, Sister Hong was a little tongue-tied, and the people watching at the door also stirred. They whispered, "Hey, it's a little magical. *CK, are you for real? What's going on? Is this a movie?" Lu Feier also widened her eyes and looked at the scene in front of her with excitement. At this time she was already convinced that this master who had been praised by Chow Kefi must be a powerful guy. He must be able to save Chow Kefi. Lu Feier couldn't help but take Sister Hong's hand and whisper excitedly, "Sister Hong, look. I told you that he's amazing." Sister Hong couldn't help but say angrily, "Bullshit. This is not magic, this is superstition, this is pretending to be mysterious." She pointed at the people watching at the door and said loudly, "Tell me, do you believe it yourself? What era is this? Why are you still doing this? This kind of person will be sentenced if he is arrested." While she was talking loudly, Li Yundong suddenly shouted hum and ha in the room, followed by a third shout, "Chow Kefi, the soul has returned. The soul has returned." In the blink of an eye, everyone saw that the curtain on the balcony was suddenly raised high, and Chow Kefi's body trembled violently. Not long after, Chow Kefi let out a groan, and her long eyelashes gently trembled as she slowly woke up. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. The fake foreigner was dumbfounded and his eyeballs almost fell out. He couldn't understand how this woman, who had no pulse just now, could come back to life in the blink of an eye without any medical treatment. Sister Hong stared at Chow Kefi dumbfoundedly, unable to say a word. Li Yundong supported Chow Kefi with one hand and leaned her against the bed. Then he glanced at the fake foreigner faintly and said, "I can understand that you, a foreigner in China's skin, don't understand all this." As he said this, he turned to look at Sister Hong and shook his head slightly. "But as a Chinese, you blindly think that the things of our ancestors are dregs and superstitions. I can't understand this." Sister Hong's face suddenly became very ugly. She opened her mouth and was about to retort, but she heard Li Yundong sigh again. "Alas, but you are right about one thing." Sister Hong asked subconsciously, "What is it?" Li Yundong said meaningfully, "You can't talk about ice in summer. Children, I'm sorry, but the internet in my house is 7 to 9, and it automatically disconnects at 9 p.m. Last night I forgot to update it and it was already past 9 p.m. so I didn't have time to update the second chapter. Vote for recommendation previous page, next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 425. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong's words made Sister Hong's face turn red. Her eyes were full of shame and anger, but she had no way to refute Li Yundong. After all, Chow Kefi, who had almost died before, had been saved by this young man in the blink of an eye. After all, no matter how eloquent she was, she couldn't defeat the hard facts. Go to see. 7KOM. On the other hand, the fake foreign devil was very unconvinced and snorted, "What good luck. Next time you won't be so lucky." Li Yundong glanced at him and smiled. He was too lazy to argue with him. He turned his head and whispered to Chow Kefi, "President Chow, how do you feel?" Chow Kefi frowned slightly. She covered her heart with one hand as if Shizi was holding her heart. She forced a smile and said softly, Li Yundong, you saved my life again. What can I do to repay you? Li Yundong chuckled and said, look at what you're saying. We're friends? Don't say that. Friends? Chow Kefi's plump red lips gently spat out 3 words. She looked at Li Yundong with blurred and complicated eyes, as if she had thousands of words to say, but she didn't know where to start. At this time, Lu Feier also rushed over and grabbed Chow Kefi's hand tightly. Her face was covered with tears and she shouted in a sobbing tone, Sister Chow, you finally woke up. You scared me to death. Chow Kefi smiled and said, yes, I just dreamed that I was flying. I flew very high, very far. When I was flying in the sky, I suddenly seemed to hear someone calling my name. I couldn't help flying back. When I opened my eyes again, I woke up. Lu Feier smiled through her tears and said, it was Li Yundong who called your soul back just now? Li Yundong smiled and said, by the way, President Chow, do you know what's going on? As he said this, he lowered his voice and asked, who on earth wants to kill you? A look of fear suddenly flashed in Chow Kefi's eyes. She opened her mouth and was about to speak when she suddenly heard a noise coming from outside. Someone shouted in the corridor, get out of the way, get out of the way. The people who had been blocking the entrance turned their heads to look and immediately dispersed. Li Yundong and Chow Kefi turned their heads and saw several policemen barging in, shouting, where are the criminals? Several security guards behind them saw Li Yundong at a glance. They immediately pointed and shouted, that's him. Many of us were injured. Li Yundong smiled and asked, you said that I hurt a lot of your people. May I ask who I hurt? Several security guards said at the same time, we were all injured. Li Yundong smiled and said, where is the injury? Can I have a look? The security guards were stunned. They subconsciously touched their bodies and found that there was no wound on them. Although they had been thrown far away by Li Yundong like a kite, they didn't feel much pain when they fell to the ground. At that time they were so nervous and scared that they didn't notice these things. Now that they were pointed at by Li Yundong, they were surprised to find that they were not injured at all. The originally aggressive security guards suddenly relaxed. The leading policeman snorted coldly and shouted, it's not up to you to decide whether or not he was injured. Li Yundong asked, then who has the final say? Another policeman sneered and said, nonsense, of course it's up to us to say. Li Yundong laughed and said, so you mean that it's up to you to say whether you hurt them or not? Even if you didn't hurt them, you can say that you hurt them? When the policeman heard this, he couldn't help but say angrily, what do you mean by that? Be careful or I'll arrest you for slander. Li Yundong glanced at the two of them and shook his head secretly. He thought for a moment and said to the security guards, tonight was actually a misunderstanding. I was in a hurry to save my friend but you stopped me from going, so there was some conflict. If possible, I'm willing to settle this matter privately. At this time, a lobby manager in a suit and leather shoes walked out of the crowd. He snorted coldly and said, settle it privately? Do you know how bad the impact of this matter on our Dihao building is? No, this matter must not be settled privately. The two policemen were also very cooperative. One of them took a step closer and stared at Li Yundong covetously, while the other took out a pair of handcuffs from his arms and showed them. Sister Hong and the fake foreigner immediately gloated in their hearts. They shouted in their hearts, catch him, catch him. Seeing that things were not going well, Chow Kefi endured the discomfort and said loudly, I can testify that he did come to save me. Is it against the law to save someone? A policeman said coldly, if you hurt someone in the process of saving someone, it's also against the law. Chow Kefi couldn't help but say angrily, the law is nothing more than human feelings. How can you be so heartless? Nowadays law enforcement needs to be humane. How do you enforce the law? Who is your leader? When the policeman saw Chow Kefi's angry expression, he was stunned for a moment, and his saliva almost fell down. When he came to his senses, he shouted with a straight face, don't talk nonsense. Come with us. Chow Kefi was shocked and angry, but she was also a person who had seen big scenes. She forcibly suppressed her anger and began to look through her mobile phone quietly. The other policeman who came with him had better eyesight than his companion. Seeing that Chow Kefi's temperament was different from ordinary people, he hesitated for a moment. He felt that this matter could be big or small, but if it was really big, if the other party had a very strong background, then he, a small policeman, would not be able to bear the consequences. He turned to the lobby manager behind him and whispered a few words to him. The lobby manager snorted. He thought for a moment and was about to speak when he suddenly heard a dignified voice not far away. Xiao Lu, what are you doing here? The policeman named Xiao Lu turned his head and saw a middle-aged man in casual clothes looking at him majestically. He was shocked and trotted over quickly. He saluted respectfully and said loudly, "Director Gong, I'm on a mission." Director Gong frowned and said, "What kind of mission is it? Take me to have a look." Xiao Lu smiled apologetically and said, "It's just a small matter. How can it be worth your time?" Director Gong snorted and said, "It's just a small matter, but it's so big. If it's really a big matter, are you going to tear the earth apart?" As he spoke, Director Gong put his hands behind his back and walked through the corridor like a beast king patrolling the mountains. The people who had been watching the fun in the corridor made way for him in awe. The lobby manager's face was full of smiles at this time. He took out a pack of cigarettes from nowhere and handed it over with a smile. "Director Gong, I'm really sorry to disturb your rest. I'm sorry, I'll ask someone to send you 2 late-night snacks later." Director Gong pushed away the cigarette in his hand with a righteous expression and said in a deep voice, "I don't smoke. What the hell is going on here?" The lobby manager said with a smile, "In fact, it's nothing much. It's just that someone broke into our Dihao hotel and hurt someone. Now these 2 policemen are going to arrest him." Director Gong snorted and said, "So arrogant? Dihao is one of the few 5-star hotels in Tianan City. How dare they act so recklessly? Is there any law or regulation in this person's eyes? They must be severely punished." The lobby manager smiled even more brightly. "Director Gong is wise. Well said. This kind of wind can't be allowed to continue. Otherwise, the face of Dihao will be lost and so will your face, won't it?" Director Gong shouted with a straight face, "Nonsense. What does my face have to do with Dihao?" The lobby manager's smile did not diminish, but he sneered in his heart, "Pretend, continue pretending. So much money is paid to you every year and you continue to pretend." Director Gong pretended to inspect the place. Another policeman who had originally advocated arresting the suspect also came over at this time and saluted. "Director Gong, this suspect has an accomplice. Should we arrest them together?" Director Gong looked at the policeman and nodded. "It's Xiao Zhang. What, this suspect has an accomplice? Arrest them all. We can't let go of any of the suspects and accomplices." Xiao Zhang was overjoyed. He turned around and was about to go into the room to arrest the suspect, but suddenly he heard Director Gong ask, "Is the suspect inside? Who is so arrogant?" Xiao Zhang quickly turned around and welcomed Director Gong into the room. Then he pointed at Li Yundong and shouted, "This person is the suspect." Director Gong took a closer look and saw that the boy was looking at him coldly. Not only was there no fear or uneasiness in his eyes, but they were full of mockery and disdain. He subconsciously became angry in his heart, but soon he found that the person in front of him seemed to be a little familiar. He was shocked and carefully looked at Li Yundong with his eyes wide open. Director Gong looked at him for a long time and asked tentatively, "Are you Li Yundong?" Li Yundong was stunned. "Do you know me?" Director Gong's face suddenly burst into an extremely bright smile. It was hard for others to imagine that his middle-aged face, which had been full of dignity and coldness just a moment ago, could burst into a cheerful smile like that of a baby. He rushed over quickly, grabbed Li Yundong's hand tightly with both hands, shook it up and down with all his might, and said loudly, "Child Li is really forgetful. We just met during the day. I went to your tea house when it opened." At this time the people inside and outside the room were all sweating, especially the policeman Xiao Zhang who had clamored to arrest him. He was sweating profusely, and his whole body was stiff as if he were sitting on wax. Sister Hong and the fake foreigner, who had been gloating and wanted to watch the fun, looked at Li Yundong with their mouths agape, as if they were looking at a visitor from outer space. When Li Yundong opened the tea house today, there were at least 70 or 80 celebrities from all walks of life. Just the names and official positions of these people made him dizzy. How could he remember who the middle-aged man in front of him was? But when Li Yundong saw that the other party was so enthusiastic and the smile on his face was as bright as a sunflower, he couldn't lose his temper. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling person, right? Li Yundong pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He smiled and said, "Ah, I remember. I'm so sorry. Hello, Director Gong." Director Gong smiled very warmly. He asked knowingly, "Why are you here today, Child Li?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I came to save a friend, but there was a misunderstanding with Dihao." As he said this, he glanced at the policeman who had clamored to arrest him. As soon as Li Yundong's gaze swept over the place, the people there immediately broke out in a cold sweat, especially the lobby manager who refused to settle the matter privately. He secretly regretted it so much that he wanted to slap himself in the face. What kind of background could make the director of the city's public security bureau so close to him, and even with some flattery? What kind of background could he have? He had provoked such a devil. How could he survive in Tianan City? Chapter 426. Go to WatchNet. While the lobby manager was thinking about how to deal with the situation, Director Gong asked the two policemen behind him loudly, "Are you here to arrest Childly?" The policeman named Xiao Zhang was tongue-tied. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat that kept rolling down. His tongue seemed to be tied and he couldn't speak. The other policeman named Xiao Lu was obviously much smarter. He said loudly, "Director, we are here to understand the situation." Director Gong glanced at him and was secretly satisfied with his alertness and response. He nodded and said, "Well, how is the situation?" Xiao Lu couldn't help but sweat rolling down his body. He looked at Chao Kefi and then at Li Yundong, complaining to himself, "Oh my god, how can I take back what I just said? Isn't this like slapping myself in the face?" But when his eyes fell on the lobby manager, he suddenly had an idea. "I got it. My friend in the Tao will die, but I won't. I found a scapegoat." Xiao Lu pointed to the lobby manager and said loudly, "Manager Wang knows the best. Let him speak." Manager Wang was so angry that he almost cursed out loud. "Mother ***, it's fine that you often come to my place to catch a few prostitutes. How dare you frame me? You really can't be trusted." But as angry as he was, he still had to say something. Manager Wang wiped the sweat from his forehead and said in a hollow voice, "In fact, it's just a small misunderstanding. Childly is just eager to save people. It's okay. It's just a small matter." As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and thought to himself, "Damn it, if these two stinky policemen can push this kind of trouble to me, can't I push it to someone else?" As he said this, he turned his head and shouted at the security guards behind him, "Are you injured or not?" The security guards were dumbfounded. They hadn't expected that such a big responsibility would be thrown to them one after another. They secretly cursed, but the lobby manager was the brother-in-law of the new mistress of the chairman of Dihao. No matter how much they complained, they didn't dare to offend him. "Go to WatchNet." The security guards all said with sad faces, "No, we're not injured at all." Manager Wang said angrily, "If you're not injured, why are you shouting? The flood nearly destroyed the Dragon King Temple." These security guards were so aggrieved that they were about to cry. They all drooped their heads and dared not speak up. Seeing this, Li Yundong also said, "It's not their fault. It's my fault. Just let it go." Unexpectedly, Director Gong suddenly shouted, "No, we can't go there like this." At this time, everyone couldn't help but look at the chameleon director strangely. They thought to themselves, "Is this director going crazy again and going to enforce the law impartially?" Director Gong said righteously, "Childly, you came to Dihao to save people at such a late hour. What kind of spirit is this?" This was a spirit of abandoning oneself and forgetting others. This was a chivalrous spirit. This is a kind of dedication that is missing in our current society. This spirit must be vigorously propagated and carried forward. I want everyone in Tianan City to know young Master Li's chivalrous heart. When he said this, almost all the people around him almost vomited on the spot. They all looked at Director Gong strangely and thought to themselves, "You were the one who said that you would arrest people before. Now you don't want to arrest them, but you're actually flattering them shamelessly. It's too disgusting, isn't it?" Chao Yi couldn't help but look at the director of the Public Security Bureau with disdain and spit in her heart. Everyone loved flattery, and even Li Yundong was no exception. However, Li Yundong was a little overwhelmed by this kind of heavyweight flattery. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "Director Gong, there's no need for that, is there?" Director Gong thought that Li Yundong was pretending to be polite, so he dragged his voice and said, "Hey, Childly, what are you talking about? How can you not use it? This is a great opportunity to publicize and educate the general public." Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart and muttered in his heart, "I guess that after you finish the publicity, I will become a spoiled brat in the eyes of the general public." Li Yundong quickly waved his hand and said, No, there's really no need. Keep a low profile, you have to keep a low profile." Director Gong suddenly understood and said with admiration, "After all, Child Li's realm is high. I admire you." Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, "No, Director Gong, you're too polite. I have one thing I want to ask Director Gong for help with." After that, he whispered a few words in Director Gong's ear. When Director Gong heard this, he was immediately overjoyed. He patted his chest and said, this is a small matter, no problem. When do you want this report, Child Li? I'll send it to you. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, you'd better give it to me as soon as possible. In addition, as for today's matter, I can settle it with Manager Wang in private. There's no need to involve so many people in these things. Li Yundong's words were unintentional, but both Director Gong and Manager Wang were listening attentively. Director Gong laughed and said, well, you guys have a good agreement. If there's any bad agreement, Child Li, you can come to me. As he said this, he glanced at Manager Wang intentionally or unintentionally. Manager Wang suddenly shivered and gritted his teeth with hatred in his heart. Damn it, Director Gong is threatening me. F***CK, I'm going to bleed again today. I just don't know how big this Child Li's appetite is. Thinking of this, Manager Wang clenched his trouser pocket tightly. He forced a smile on his face and said to Li Yundong, Child Li, can I have a word with you? Li Yundong nodded and walked to a deserted place in the corridor with Manager Wang. Just as Li Yundong was about to speak, Manager Wang rushed to say, Child Li, I know that I didn't recognize Mount Tai today and offended you. Please be merciful and let me live. How much do you want? Name a price. As long as I can afford it, I'll send it over without hesitation. When Li Yundong heard this, he was stunned and thought to himself, no way. It was obviously me who caused trouble. How did it become him paying me? Manager Wang's heart trembled when he saw Li Yundong's blank expression. He gritted his teeth and said, Child Li, 100,000 yuan, 100,000 yuan. What do you think? Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, damn it, such a small matter can be worth 100,000 yuan? Is this more powerful than extortion? Manager Wang saw that Li Yundong still didn't speak, and his heart was bleeding with hatred. He said again, Child Li, it's not easy for us to do business. Please give us 200,000 yuan. What do you think? At this time, Li Yundong saw that Manager Wang's eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were so ferocious that he seemed to want to sell his mother. He quickly shook his head and said, No, I didn't mean that. Manager Wang's face turned pale and he cried in his heart, damn it, what do you mean? You don't want money. What do you want? The woman around you is so beautiful and you have a big star. I don't think I need to find a woman for you. You don't want money, you don't want women, what do you want? By the way, didn't Director Gong say that he opened a tea house before? Yes, it must be like this. Child Li is probably afraid of leaving something behind, so he must be counting on me to buy his tea house voucher. Humph, what a wishful thinking. Manager Wang's heart skipped a beat and he said, Child Li, I know that you opened a tea house. How about I use public funds to buy your tea house voucher of 200,000 yuan every year? Li Yundong was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, is this guy out of his mind? Does he have too much money to spend? Manager Wang saw that Li Yundong still didn't speak, and thought that Li Yundong wouldn't agree, so he asked tentatively, how about 300,000 yuan? Young Master Li, please say something. Oh, I beg you, 400,000 yuan, 400,000 yuan, no more. If it's more, I won't be able to explain. Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He had a strange expression on his face and thought to himself, does this guy think I'm a rich second generation who wants to rip me off? Manager Wang's heart trembled when he saw Li Yundong's strange expression. He suddenly gritted his teeth and said, 500,000 yuan, Child Li, I'm very sincere. Please say something. Li Yundong saw that Manager Wang was about to go crazy. If he didn't say anything, he was afraid that this guy would want to dig his ancestors' graves. He quickly said, don't add it anymore. Manager Wang finally let out a sigh of relief. At this time he only wanted to send this god of plague away as soon as possible. He couldn't care about anything else now. Manager Wang immediately said, Child Li, a gentleman's word is as fast as a whip. I'll send someone to your tea house tomorrow to settle this matter. You can rest assured that I won't dare to lie to you. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, no, it's not that. Manager Wang trembled with fear. His legs trembled and he thought to himself, what else can this man do? Oh my god, I'd better run away quickly. I can't afford to offend him, can't I? Manager Wang didn't wait for Li Yundong to speak again. He grabbed Li Yundong's hand and shook it twice. It's a deal, Child Li, he said loudly. I'll go deal with other things first. I'll come back later to apologize. After that, he turned around and ran away as if the back of his pants was on fire. Li Yundong was stunned on the spot. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, damn it, am I that scary? Why can't I be a good person these days? But on second thought he couldn't help but sigh at the power of worldly power. A misunderstanding could solve the business problem of the tea house. This was equivalent to signing a business order of 500,000 yuan. Should I accept the money or not? Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly for a moment. Just as he was hesitating about whether to return the money or not, he suddenly heard Chao Kefi calling his name behind him. Li Yundong looked back and saw that Chao Kefi was wearing a fur coat, which made her look elegant and extraordinary. She looked at him with a lazy and charming face and said with a smile, "What are you daydreaming about? I've called you several times." Li Yundong came to his senses and said with a smile without thinking, "I was thinking that it's really strange recently. Wherever I go, I can meet people I know." Chao Kefi looked at Li Yundong and for a moment, her eyes were a little dazed. In her impression, this boy was still young and inexperienced a few months ago. Although he had all kinds of magical abilities, he was still an ordinary person after all, and she could even look down on him. But now she had to stand on her tiptoes and look up to see him. How could a person climb so fast? How high could he climb in the future? Thinking of this, Chao Kefi couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She sighed faintly and said, "Everyone in the world knows me." Li Yundong was stunned. He didn't know Chao Kefi's thoughts as a woman. He only felt that her words were full of sarcasm and mockery. Li Yundong recalled these words and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Who in the world doesn't know the king? After laughing for a while, he noticed that Chao Kefi was carrying a bag in her hand. Lu Feier and her agent, Sister Hong, were also standing next to her as if they were going out. He asked curiously, "Where are you going?" Chao Kefi smiled and said, "So many things have happened, and Lu Feier's whereabouts have been discovered by the fans. We have to go back to Sanya as soon as possible." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then be careful on the way." Sister Hong, who was standing to one side, looked at Li Yundong strangely. After experiencing these things, she no longer dared to glare at Li Yundong. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with some reluctance. She waved her hand and smiled sweetly. "Hey, Immortal Li, I'll go first. When you have time, you can come to the crew to see me." Li Yundong smiled and waved his hand. "Okay, I'll go back when I'm free." Speaking of this, Li Yundong suddenly said to Chao Kefi, "By the way, President Chao, can you stay for 2 or 3 days and do me a favor?" Chao Kefi didn't want to leave, but she couldn't find a reason to stay. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately beamed with joy and said without hesitation, "Okay?" Lu Feier snorted. "You only care about the opposite sex. Sister Chao, you've gone too far. I'm ignoring you." Chao Kefi smiled and pinched her cheek. "Well, I'll compensate you when we go back. Be good, the crew is waiting for you to go back to film. They can't do it without you, but it doesn't matter without me." Lu Feier snorted, and Sister Hong, who was next to her, also tried to persuade her. "Feier, listen to President Chao. You really should go back. Do you want to stay and see the headlines of the entertainment section of Tianan Daily tomorrow?" Only then did Lu Feier say resentfully, "Well, you two don't have to sing a duet." "I know." After that, she got into the elevator with flagging interest. After watching her and her agent disappear from his sight, Li Yundong whispered a few words to Chao Kefi. Hearing this, Chao Kefi was slightly shocked and blurted out, "You want me to continue pretending to be dead?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "No, so many people have seen that you're not dead. I just want you to continue pretending to be half dead." Chao Kefi asked curiously, "Why?" Li Yundong smiled confidently. "It's very simple. Don't you want to know who wants to kill you? Humph, this is called inviting the enemy to enter the urn." Chapter 427. Go to WatchNet. When Li Yundong returned home, it was already late at night, but the house was still brightly lit. Everyone was waiting for his return. WatchNet. 7 km. Ziyuan was sitting cross-legged in a corner with her eyes closed. The 3 Sherbua of the Fox Zen school were sitting cross-legged on the carpet near the sofa, as if they were meditating and practicing qi. Zhou Qin paced back and forth at the balcony door, her head lowered as she pondered about something. Ruan Hongling and the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were sitting on the carpet in the middle of the living room, watching the evening news on the TV station. Su Chan was sitting on the side closest to the balcony, hugging her knees and resting her chin on them. Although her face was facing the TV, her eyes glanced out of the balcony from time to time. After living in the secular world for a while, the little foxes gradually became accustomed to television and had a general understanding of the contents of the television. As they watched the news, they whispered to each other, "Hey, do you think we're in the news?" "I don't know, but there should be. I think I saw a guy shooting for a while." "Didn't fourth junior sister say that she saw the news in Tianan City when she came back tonight?" Can you watch the replay now? Idiot, the evening news is not a repeat. You don't even know that. Yes, you're smart. You watched the news broadcast as if it was a TV drama. While they were arguing in a low voice, a little fox suddenly pointed at the TV in surprise and shouted, "Look, it's our Desanxian." As soon as she said this, the little foxes immediately gathered in front of the TV. Zhou Qin also stopped and looked at the TV. Even the 3 Sherbois of the Fox Zen school opened their eyes, leaned over and watched curiously. Only Ziyuan opened her eyes slightly, smiled and then closed them again. Su Chan pointed at the TV and shouted in surprise, "It's me. Look, it's me." The little foxes also pointed at themselves on the TV excitedly. Me too. Those who couldn't find it shouted, "Damn it, I didn't even see myself and the image is gone." Ruan Hongling saw that the little foxes' faces were almost glued to the TV. Their heads were shaking so she couldn't find them for a long time. She couldn't help but say sourly, "You're really ignorant. What's so strange about being on TV?" As soon as she finished speaking, Su Chan turned around and said with a smile, "Hongling, I see you." When Ruan Hongling heard this, she immediately leaned over and widened her eyes. Where? Su Chan had a mischievous smile on her face. She stuck out her tongue and giggled. "The scene is over." Ruan Hongling immediately said angrily, "Are you playing with me?" Su Chan shook her head and said, "Well, it's nothing. Hongling, you're right. What's so strange about being on TV? It doesn't matter if you don't see it, right?" Ruan Hongling was furious. She stared at Su Chan with her eyes wide open and thought to herself, "Well, she wants to fight with me. This little fox spirit, it's fine if she can't get along with me on normal days, but how dare she challenge me at this time?" The two of them were staring at each other like fighting cocks. Zhou Qin suddenly pushed open the door on the balcony and said with a smile, "Master, you're back?" Su Chan turned her head abruptly and said in surprise, "Yundong is back?" At this time, everyone in the living room stood up and looked at the balcony in unison. They saw Li Yundong walking in from the balcony with a sullen face. Everyone saw Li Yundong's serious expression. As soon as he entered the living room, the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. They all looked at each other for a moment, not knowing what had happened and feeling uneasy. Seeing Li Yundong like this, although Su Chan was also a little nervous, she still relied on her close relationship with Li Yundong to ask boldly, "Yundong, what happened?" Li Yundong glanced at her, patted her head and then smiled slightly. "It's nothing. President Chao was attacked." Everyone suddenly exclaimed. Su Chan couldn't help grabbing Li Yundong's hand and asking with concern, "What's going on, Yundong? Is President Chao all right?" Li Yundong's eyes quickly swept across the crowd. He shook his head and said, "She's fine now. I've already taken her to the hospital." Zhou Qin asked, "Is President Chao being chased by debt collectors again?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "No, someone deliberately wanted to kill her." Zhou Qin couldn't help frowning. "Who wanted to kill her? What kind of enemy does she have?" Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "I don't know, but I think President Chao will tell us when she wakes up." At this time, Chao Yi couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Is President Chao all right?" Li Yundong glanced at her and said with a smile, "She should be fine. She's still in the hospital for observation." Chao Yi couldn't help patting her chest and said with a smile, "Ba, that's great." Li Yundong smiled non-committally and said, "Well, it's over for the time being. The police have already arranged for someone to protect her. Nothing will happen to her again." As he spoke, he nodded to Ziyuan and winked at Zhou Qin. "Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, come to my room. Also, everyone go to bed. It's late." Everyone immediately scattered and went back to their rooms. Su Chan saw that Li Yundong had talked to Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, but not her. It was obvious that he felt that she was unreliable and not a person to discuss things with. She pouted and was a little unhappy, but soon, her eyes rolled and a sly smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. After Li Yundong entered the room, he watched Zhou Qin close the door and said in a low voice, "Zhou Qin, today's opening ceremony is over. Can you consider preparing to go to the Zhuji phase?" Zhou Qin hadn't expected that Li Yundong would call her in and say such a thing. She looked at Li Yundong bitterly, sighed slightly in her heart and said faintly, "Are you in such a hurry to drive me away?" Li Yundong was stunned for a moment, but then he couldn't help laughing. He waved at Zhou Qin and whispered a few words in her ear. When Zhou Qin heard this, she was surprised and asked, "Is that okay?" Li Yundong smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. If it doesn't work, you can continue to move forward and go to the Zhuji phase. If it works, you can just pull out the poisonous thorn in your heart. Zhou Qin thought for a moment, then nodded and said decisively, okay. Then I'll go and prepare. Ziyuan saw that Zhou Qin's attitude had changed 180 degrees after listening to Li Yundong's words. After Zhou Qin left, she couldn't help laughing and said, "What did you say to her? Why are you being so mysterious?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "It's a secret, but you'll know soon enough." Ziyuan couldn't help but say angrily, "Then why did you call me in? Are you keeping me guessing?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Don't be angry. I did call you in because I have something to discuss with you." Ziyuan glared at Li Yundong and said, "What's the matter? Hurry up and say it." Li Yundong saw that Ziyuan, who had always been as elegant as a fairy, actually showed such a rare look of a girl. Her beautiful eyes were full of hope, and her fairy face was both angry and happy. It was as if a young girl was angry at her boyfriend. Li Yundong was a little stunned, and his gaze made Ziyuan come back to her senses. She turned her head away awkwardly, her ears blushing and her eyes flickering. For a moment, both of them were a little embarrassed and speechless. There seemed to be a faint ambiguity flowing in the air. After a long time, Li Yundong coughed dryly and told Ziyuan about what had happened that night. Then he said, "When we targeted Zhuang Yiting and Chao Yi, Zhuang Yiting first took the initiative to expose Chao Yi. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence?" Ziyuan gradually calmed down. She stroked the black hair at her temples, her eyes narrowed, and she thought for a moment before saying, "According to what you just said, there are a few coincidences in what happened tonight. First, why was Chao Kefi attacked? Moreover, the other party tried to kill Chao Kefi by dispersing her soul. This means that this person must be a cultivator. And why would a cultivator risk being struck to death by heavenly thunder to try to kill a mortal like Chao Kefi?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "That's right. And the second coincidence is, how did this person know where Chao Kefi and the others were staying?" Ziyuan also said naturally, "Unless this person has been watching Chao Kefi from the beginning and has been following her all the way to the place where she is staying." Li Yundong continued, "There is another possibility. That is, this person heard Chao Kefi say where she was staying when de Sangxian left." Ziyuan's eyes suddenly lit up. She smiled coldly and said, "Hey, did you notice that when Chao Kefi first came, who in the Fox Zen school showed the most unusual emotions?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "You told me about this. Chao Yi and Zhuang Yiting were the most unusual. They looked as if they had seen a visitor from outer space, and their faces were full of shock and disbelief." Ziyuan nodded slightly and said, "It's a pity that their emotions only showed for a moment and soon disappeared. I didn't pay much attention to their other emotions. However, judging from their reactions and our previous inference, the identity of the culprit who attacked Chao Kefi is obvious. It is very likely that the one who attacked Chao Kefi was second Sherboy Yanfang." Li Yundong nodded slowly. He sighed softly and said, "This is also what I don't understand the most. If it was really Yanfang, why did she attack Chao Kefi? Moreover, she had 10,000 ways to kill Chao Kefi. Why did she choose to shatter Chao Kefi's soul?" After pondering for a while, Ziyuan said, "If an ordinary person is killed, his 3 souls and 7 spirits will temporarily stay in his body for a period of time and not dissipate. Just like Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, cultivators can give them a new life by restraining their 3 souls and 7 spirits. But if the other party's soul is forced out of the body, if the soul doesn't return to the body within an hour, although the body is still alive, it will actually become a vegetable. In this way, the other party doesn't have to risk killing the other party and attracting the heavenly thunder, and it can also make it impossible for the other party to gather the soul to resurrect the person. Because once the soul is scattered, the person's spiritual energy will be scattered between heaven and earth, and it can no longer be gathered. Unless..." Li Yundong listened attentively. When he heard the last round, he saw that Ziyuan hesitated slightly and didn't continue, so he asked casually, "Unless what?" Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "Nothing. In short, this person wants Chao Kefi to become a vegetable, but she doesn't actually want to kill her." Li Yundong didn't take Ziyuan's hesitation to heart. He continued to ponder what had happened tonight. After thinking for a while, he said, "In short, this matter is very strange. Why did Yanfang attack Chao Kefi? The motive of this matter is very confusing." As he spoke, Li Yundong seemed to think of something. He asked again, "By the way, why does Chao Kefi only have 1 soul and 3 spirits?" Ziyuan also shook her head and smiled helplessly. "I don't know either. It's the first time I've met such a person." Li Yundong thought for a while, but he couldn't figure it out. He smiled and said, "Forget it, don't think about it." The truth will come out. Moreover, I feel that in the next 2 days, Yen Fang will not be able to bear it. Tomorrow she wilt. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly heard a knock on the door. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "Come in." With a creak, the little girl's eyes rolled around and she poked her head in. She asked tentatively, "Yundong, can I come in?" Li Yundong scolded with a smile, "You've already come in half. Can I stuff you back in? Come in. What's the matter?" Su Chan jumped in with a smile, threw herself into Li Yundong's arms, and said coquettishly, "I have something to talk to you about." Seeing this, Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "I'll go back first. Let's talk about it tomorrow." Li Yundong nodded at her with a smile and said, "Okay, let's see Zhou Qin off tomorrow." After Su Chan watched Ziyuan leave, she blinked and asked curiously, "Is Sister Zhou Qin going to the Zhuji phase tomorrow?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, her cultivation has improved by leaps and bounds. It can be said that she has made rapid progress. Tomorrow she should also set foot on the road to the Zhuji phase. By the way, why are you looking for me?" Su Chan giggled and said mysteriously, "Yundong, there are 2 things I don't know if I should say to you or not." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Is there anything you can't say to me? Say it, silly girl." Su Chan nodded. She stood on tiptoe and whispered a few words into Li Yundong's ear. At first, Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's just the 2 of us. Why are you being so mysterious?" But soon the smile on Li Yundong's face disappeared. He asked with a cold expression, "Is what you said true?" Vote for recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 428. Go to WatchNet. In the face of Li Yundong's rhetorical question, Su Chan nodded vigorously and said, "It's absolutely true. I've confirmed it twice. And last time, I heard someone quarreling with Chao Yi Sherboy in her room." Li Yundong frowned and pondered for a while, then asked in a deep voice, "Who else knows about this?" Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, "Just me. Go to WatchNet." 7 KOM. A smile appeared on Li Yundong's face. He stroked the girl's hair with relief and said softly, "My girl knows how to share my worries and difficulties." Su Chan smiled sweetly. The girl held Li Yundong's arm and said in a sweet voice, "I always make trouble for you. I feel sad, so I have to help you in other ways." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Well done, but don't let others know." Su Chan nodded obediently. She asked suspiciously, "Yundong, what are you going to do?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I have my own way. You can go back first. Don't let others find out that something is wrong." Su Chan giggled and said, "I know. Although your girl always causes you trouble sometimes, she is not a fool." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Well, my girl is the smartest." Hearing Li Yundong's praise, Su Chan was so happy that she beamed with joy. She walked to the door, turned around and waved her hand. She whispered in a sweet voice, "Then I'm leaving." Li Yundong smiled and waved at the girl. After the door was closed, the smile on his face faded little by little and he looked thoughtful. Under the moonlight, Li Yundong's figure was like a boulder, motionless, deep and cold. At dawn the next day, when the people of the Fox Zen School got up, they were surprised to find that Li Yundong was already standing in the living room early in the morning. Li Yundong stood facing the east-facing balcony with his hands behind his back. His feet were in an irregular position, and the balcony curtains and floor-to-ceiling windows were open. The morning breeze outside blew the corners of his clothes, and the golden morning light was sprinkled on his body like a gauze, making him look like a shining golden pagoda, full of mystery and majesty. The little foxes of the Fox Zen School looked at Li Yundong's back and held their breath for a moment. One by one, they looked at their leader with admiration, as if as long as they stood behind him, they would have nothing to worry about, and everything would be peaceful and happy. Zhou Qin and Li Yundong had agreed to embark on the Zhuji phase that day, so they came to the living room early in the morning. Seeing the little foxes in the living room in a daze, she followed their gazes out of curiosity. Zhou Qin was stunned by what she saw. She looked at Li Yundong with infatuation, and her breathing seemed to have stopped. At this time, Li Yundong had slowly lost the sharpness he had when he had just started cultivating. Instead, he was calm and shrewd. In Zhou Qin's opinion, Li Yundong used to be like a dazzling golden sun, which people couldn't look at directly. But now, Li Yundong was like a towering mountain that people looked up to. "He's growing up so fast." Zhou Qin sighed slightly in her heart, and there was even a trace of sweetness and joy in her heart. She was not like Su Chan, who had accompanied Li Yundong when he was at his lowest, but she had finally witnessed the boy's slow transformation from immaturity to maturity. In her opinion, nothing could make her happier than watching Li Yundong grow up and mature. This kind of joy even surpassed the joy of her own cultivation. Gradually, more and more people came to the living room. They were all shocked by the different temperament Li Yundong had shown today, and none of them dared to breathe. When everyone had arrived, Li Yundong turned around, nodded slightly, and said in a deep voice, "You must be wondering why I'm posing here so early in the morning." When the little foxes heard Li Yundong's words, they couldn't help but laugh softly. Su Chan and Ziyuan knew what Li Yundong wanted to say, so they didn't laugh. They just held their breath and waited for Li Yundong to continue. Li Yundong nodded to the crowd and motioned for them to sit down and make themselves at home. He stood in the field and said in a deep voice, "This time, our Fox Zen school has experienced a major event, which is that we have finally opened up our own source of wealth. Desangxian has successfully opened its business, and I believe that after the opening ceremony on the first day, no other sects will dare to strangle our Desangxian. That is to say, from now on, our Fox Zen school will no longer have to rely on others for food and clothing and be afraid." The little foxes were used to Li Yundong's humor and easygoing manner. Suddenly, when they saw Li Yundong speaking with a serious face, they were all a little uncomfortable for a moment. They looked at each other and didn't know whether they should applaud at this time or not. Li Yundong ignored them and continued, in addition to the opening ceremony, there is another event worth celebrating." Li Yundong nodded to Zhou Qin and motioned for her to come to him. He said, "Zhou Qin is about to reach the Zhuji phase. Today I will solemnly teach her a few powerful magical weapons. I hope everyone can bear witness." As the leader of the sect, Li Yundong had absolute control over the powerful magical weapons in the sect, so there was no objection from the Fox Zen school. The little foxes looked at Zhou Qin eagerly, their eyes full of envy. They all thought to themselves, "This guy is really lucky. She has Rinyuan Jindan and a powerful magical weapon given by the leader. I'm so envious." Li Yundong saw that they were all looking at him eagerly, as if he knew what they were thinking. He smiled slightly and said, "Don't be envious. I promise you that in the future, if there are elixirs and elixirs, you will definitely get them. Moreover, if there are powerful magical weapons, you will definitely get them." When the little foxes heard this, they immediately beamed with joy and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" Li Yundong nodded and raised his hand. The little foxes immediately fell silent and stopped making trouble. Ziyuan, who was standing to one side, saw this and felt a little emotional in her heart. Since Li Yundong took over as the leader of the Fox Zen school, although he has been very loved, the little foxes have always been close to him and lack authority. Therefore, the three Sherbois have always been needed to discipline these little foxes. But now, Li Yundong's bearing was enough to subdue these lawless little foxes. At this time, Li Yundong said to Zhou Qin seriously, "Zhou Qin, kneel down. Now, as your master, I will teach you powerful magical weapons. I hope that you can make good use of them after you reach the Zhuji phase." Zhou Qin's face was also full of solemnity. She knelt down respectfully, raised her hands high, and lowered her head slightly. She looked at Li Yundong's shoes and said, "Master, please give me the treasure." Li Yundong took out the cold saw-toothed Vajra wheel from the colorful brocade pouch he carried with him and handed it to her, saying, "This is the powerful magical weapon of Yi Yu of the Fox Zen school. Its original name is the cold saw-toothed Vajra wheel. Now I will rename it Chiwa and give it to you. I hope that you can use it to cut off all the thorns and difficulties on the path of cultivation." Zhou Qin took it respectfully and put it aside. At this time, Li Yundong took out a fiery red whip from the brocade pouch and said in a deep voice, "Zhou Qin, take the treasure." Zhou Qin raised her hands again and said respectfully, "Master, please give me the treasure." Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "This is the powerful magical weapon of LV Fengping of the Yin-Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. Although I don't know its original name, I will rename it the Vulcan's Whip today. I hope that it can be carried forward in your hands." Zhou Qin took it respectfully and placed the Vulcan's Whip beside her. At this time, Ruan Hongling, who had been watching the scene, suddenly whispered to Ziyuan, "Sister Ziyuan, today is the first time I've found that Li Yundong is really serious." Ziyuan's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. Without turning her head, she replied with a smile, "Was he not serious when he was on Mount Tianlong?" Ruan Hongling snorted. "This guy is always smiling all day long. He's not serious at all. I only remember that he teased me. Who would remember something that happened so long ago?" Zi Yuan watched as Li Yundong solemnly handed over the powerful magical weapons to Zhou Qin. Her eyes suddenly became a little blurred, as if she wanted to see through the scene in front of her and see a distant picture in the depths of her memory. She murmured dreamily, "I remember." Li Yundong's voice suddenly became incomparably spacious and leisurely in Zi Yuan's ears, as if it had come from a distant place. This dignified and solemn voice reminded her of her master. It was as if that gentle figure was swaying in front of her eyes, and that gentle voice was flowing in her ears. Just as Zi Yuan was in a daze, Ruan Hongling, who was beside her, suddenly stretched out her hand and shook it hard in front of her eyes. She whispered, "Hey, Sister Zi Yuan, what's wrong with you?" Zi Yuan seemed to wake up from a dream. She suddenly came back to her senses. In her eyes, the vague figure in the depths of her memory disappeared, replaced by Li Yundong's figure. There was a strong sense of confusion in Zi Yuan's eyes. She couldn't help comparing her master with the boy in front of her. In her impression, her master was like the clouds and the wind, casual and natural. She had never seen him lose his temper. He was always so calm and natural, and his eyes seemed to see through the world and everything. As for this boy, sometimes he was like fire and sometimes he was like a mountain. He was dignified and unpredictable. Zi Yuan thought in her heart, and she couldn't help whispering, "They are obviously two completely different people. Why do I always feel that they are so similar?" Ruan Hongling, who was standing to one side, sighed in her heart. She knew that it was precisely because her Shiji admired her master so much that she had a deep imprint on her. No matter what, she was imitating her master and chasing after his figure and footprints. Sister Zi Yuan used to have an inexplicable love for master, but now she has obviously fallen in love with this guy, but she refuses to admit it. Alas, I don't know when this layer of paper will be broken. Ruan Hongling thought with a sad face. Ruan Hongling knew that once Zi Yuan indulged in chasing after her master's footprints again, she would return to the appearance of an otherworldly fairy. It was fine if it was just this appearance, but what if her sister Zi Yuan was like her master and flew away without caring about anything? What would she do? Wouldn't that mean that he was going to be all alone? Ruan Hongling didn't want Zi Yuan to become like this, but she didn't have any good ideas, so she said casually, "Sister Zi Yuan, why does Li Yundong have to be the leader of the Fox Zen school? If he sets up his own sect, he might be able to become a great master of his generation." At this time, Zi Yuan became slightly sober. She sighed softly and said, "With Li Yundong's talent and opportunities, if he sets up his own sect, he will definitely become a great master in the future." A great master? So exaggerated? Although Ruan Hongling disagreed in her heart, she didn't refute it. The two of them whispered. At this time, Li Yundong took out the third powerful magical weapon from the brocade pouch. When everyone saw this powerful magical weapon, they immediately exclaimed, "Lioha!" Ruan Hongling also opened her mouth wide and whispered, "No way, the Lioha will also be passed on to Zhou Qin? Aren't you afraid that someone will kill you and take the treasure?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and did not say anything. At this time, Li Yundong held the Lioha with both hands and said, "Zhou Qin, take the treasure." Zhou Qin raised her hands again and said, "Master, please give me the treasure." Li Yundong said, "This is the powerful magical weapon of Yen Fong of the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school. Now I will pass it to you. I hope you will make good use of it in the future." Zhou Qin respectfully took the Lioha. At this time, the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were so red that their eyes almost turned into rabbit eyes. It was already good enough for ordinary cultivators to have one powerful magical weapon, but Zhou Qin had actually received 3 at once, and each of them was an extremely powerful cultivation magical weapon. Isn't this too exaggerated? Is it so profitable to be Li Yundong's disciple? Li Yundong didn't seem to see the pairs of shining eyes of the little foxes. After passing the magical weapons, he was about to speak when he suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Li Yundong looked up and saw Su Chan very cleverly saying, "I'll go and have a look." As she said this, she trotted to the door, opened it and took a look. Then she turned to Li Yundong and said loudly, "Yundong, it's a woman. She's looking for you." Li Yundong was stunned for a moment and thought, "A woman? Oh, who knows I live here?" Chapter 429. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong turned around and walked to the door. When he got there, he saw a tall woman in a professional suit standing at the door. Li Yundong asked curiously, "Who are you?" As soon as the woman saw Li Yundong, a bright smile appeared on her face. She said in a deliberately flattering manner, "Childly, right? I'm an employee of Dihao. Our manager asked me to deliver something. Go to Quan Net." 7 KOM. Only then did Li Yundong understand that he had extorted a sum of money from the woman in Dihao yesterday. Early this morning, this sucker had come to give him money. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said, "Forget it. You can take all these things back." The woman's face suddenly changed dramatically. She said in a trembling voice, "Child Li, how can you not want it? Didn't we already agree?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "I can't accept it. You can take it back." The woman was anxious and afraid. She was almost crying. She said in a sobbing tone, "Child Li, don't make things difficult for me. I'm just a small employee. It's not easy for me to make a living. You can't make me lose my job." Li Yundong frowned. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Ziyuan come out and ask softly, "What happened?" When Li Yundong told her what had happened in a low voice, Ziyuan suddenly laughed. She looked at the woman who was so anxious that she was crying and whispered to Li Yundong, "You went out yesterday and gained a lot. How come I didn't know about this?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I was thinking about other things yesterday, so I forgot to tell you. Besides, it was not a glorious thing, so I was too embarrassed to tell you. I didn't expect that the other party would come to me today." Ziyuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, "How could they not come to you? You are so cruel. You robbed them of 500,000 yuan without even asking. TSK, what a great deal. If you open your mouth, Bill Gates will have to beg for food." Li Yundong said with a wry smile, "Come on, don't gloat. Don't make fun of me. What should I do?" Ziyuan asked curiously, "Take it. Why not?" Li Yundong was taken aback. "No way," he said. "Did I hear that right? You're actually encouraging me to accept this kind of money?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "Have you ever seen a Buddhist refuse any incense money? Do you think these monks don't know that a lot of the money is dirty? Money doesn't matter if it's clean or not, it only depends on who uses it. If you think the money is dirty, then you can use it in a clean place. That will be all right, right? Hee, if all of us cultivators thought like you, we would have starved to death a long time ago." Li Yundong couldn't help but chuckle. He thought for a moment and said readily, "Okay, let's do as you say." When the woman saw Li Yundong and Ziyuan whispering to each other, she stretched her neck to listen. However, she could only hear a few vague words such as cultivators, incense money, and so on. She was confused by what she heard. When Li Yundong turned around, the woman immediately looked at him eagerly. As long as Li Yundong said the word no, she would immediately use her ability to cry, make a scene, and hang herself. Anyway, she would not go back until she completed the task. Li Yundong saw that the woman had put on a posture of long-term resistance, and he was also happy in his heart. He smiled and said, Okay, I'll accept it. Don't pretend like I'm bullying good people." The woman immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said with an apologetic smile, "Child Li, you are so magnanimous. I really admire you." Hearing this, Li Yundong shook his head secretly. What kind of world is this? The one who gives money is still a grandson, but the one who receives it is a master? Alas, this world is really F***king touching. Li Yundong turned to Ziyuan and said, "Since you agreed to accept the money, you can deal with this matter. I'll go in first." Ziyuan glared at Li Yundong angrily and said, "You want me to clean up your mess for you? You're so shameless." Li Yundong was stunned. He subconsciously looked at Ziyuan's hand and asked, "Which hand will help me clean up?" Ziyuan was very embarrassed. She glared at Li Yundong and then walked to her residence opposite. Without looking back, she said to the beauty who had given her money, "Come with me." After Li Yundong finished speaking, he also felt that what he had said was a little inappropriate. He smiled dryly and walked into the room. When he calmed down, he continued to say to Zhou Qin, "I'm going to walk all the way to the Himalayas and carry out the Zhuji phase on the snowy mountain. Can you persist on this difficult and long journey?" In Li Yundong's opinion, although Zhou Qin had a determined personality, she was from a wealthy family after all, and she loved cleanliness very much. It was really difficult for her to go to Tibet alone and eat in the wind and sleep in the open like he did. Zhou Qin seemed to know Li Yundong's concerns. She smiled slightly and said, "Master, I heard that when Ziyuan was in the Zhuji phase, she begged alms along the way for more than 2,000 miles, and finally reached the destination to carry out the Zhuji phase. I think I can do what she can do." Li Yundong's eyes were full of admiration. He nodded and said, "Well, take these powerful magical weapons with you. Don't show them to others." Zhou Qin nodded seriously and solemnly held the powerful magical weapons in her hands. Li Yundong said to her, "Go and pack up now. We'll set off in a while." Zhou Qin nodded and was about to enter the room when she heard the doorbell ring. The little girl was clever and immediately jumped to the door. She opened the door and stuck her head out to take a look. She was immediately startled and ran back to Li Yundong's side. She whispered in his ear, "Yundong, there are 2 policemen at the door. Are they looking for you?" Li Yundong's eyes narrowed, and he secretly nodded at Su Chan's cleverness. He thought to himself, in the past, this little girl would definitely shout and shout. Now this little girl has also grown up. Li Yundong walked to the door and saw 2 policemen standing there. They were the 2 policemen he had met last night. As soon as he went out, the 2 policemen immediately saluted him. Xiao Zhang, the policeman who had been clamoring to arrest Li Yundong, said with an apologetic smile, "Child Li, we meet again." Li Yundong looked him up and down and asked curiously, "Why are you here?" The smile on Xiao Zhang's face suddenly froze and he didn't know what to say. He wanted to say something soft, but when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he really didn't know how to say them. Xiao Lu, the policeman next to him, was more clever. He quickly handed over a sealed bag in his hand and said with a smile, "Child Li, this is what Director Gong asked us to send." Li Yundong took the sealed bag calmly and said casually, "Did Director Gong ask you to come?" Xiao Zhang suddenly cursed in his heart, "Nonsense, if it weren't for the director asking me to come, I wouldn't have to look at you like this. You just have a great father. What are you so proud of?" Xiao Zhang's face was ugly, but the smile on Xiao Lu's face became more and more brilliant. He said with a smile, "Child Li's guess is really accurate. It was really Director Gong who asked us to come. He said that we offended Child Li last night, and today we have to apologize to you." Li Yundong smiled slightly, glanced at them and said, "In the future, law enforcement should be more humane. The power given to you by the people is not for you to show off." Xiao Lu quickly nodded and said with a smile, "Child Li is right. You are right to teach us a lesson." Seeing that his companion's face had darkened, he quickly nudged him with his elbow. Xiao Zhang forced out a smile and said dryly, "Yes, yes, young Master Li said it well." Li Yundong saw that his smile was uglier than crying, and Xiao Lu beside him was even more embarrassed. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He didn't want to embarrass the 2 of them anymore, so he waved his hand and said, "Forget it, you can go. I still have something to do, so I won't greet you anymore." Xiao Lu quickly smiled and said, "Child Li, you are busy. I won't disturb you." After that, he dragged his companion next to him to salute, and then watched Li Yundong turn around and enter the room. Only then did they dare to turn around and leave. After leaving the community, Xiao Zhang spat and said angrily, "How old are you? You haven't even grown a few hairs on your head, yet you are already teaching people like an old man. Who do you think you are?" However, Xiao Lu shook his head and said, "Although this man is young, his bearing is really not small. It's not like you didn't see his background last night. Even Director Gong was polite to him. If he wanted to kill us, wouldn't it be as easy as crushing an ant? But how did you see him talk? What is broad-mindedness? This is broad-mindedness." Xiao Zhang sneered and said, "Humph, if I had powerful parents, I would also have broad-mindedness." Hearing this, Xiao Lu couldn't help but sigh, "Alas, you hate your father for not being strong." The 2 of them talked all the way out of the community, but Li Yundong didn't know what they were talking about behind his back. He held the sealed bag in his hand and thought about what the 2 policemen had said and their attitudes just now. He suddenly felt a little emotional. At this moment, Li Yundong completely understood why all sects had worked hard to get close to the royal power since ancient times. Emperor Wu of the Northern Wei dynasty had put Ko Qinji in an important position, so the Northern Heavenly Master Taoism had risen. During the Song dynasty, Emperor Huizong of Song believed in Mount Longhu, so the Jingyi school had unified the world. Genghis Khan and Kublai had admired Qiu Chuji, so the Chuanzhen sect had become famous all over the world. When the sect and the secular power merged into one, the energy it produced would be huge and immeasurable. In the past, if he had encountered such a thing, he would definitely have suffered a great loss. But now, even the director of the Public Security Bureau was smiling at him, and the arrogant policeman had become subservient. Where did all this come from? Li Yundong knew very well that all this came from Zhou Qin's family power and background, but why did Zhou Qin favor him? It was cultivation. It was the transcendental power that cultivation brought to him that attracted her. It's good to cultivate in Six Fan School. Li Yundong held the sealed bag in his hand and suddenly sighed softly in his heart. He shook his head and threw this little episode out of his mind. He opened the sealed bag and took out the document inside. After glancing at it, he immediately frowned slightly, and a sharp light shot out of his eyes as if he was lost in thought. It wasn't until Li Yundong came back to his senses that he found Su Chan and the others looking at him. He didn't even dare to breathe. Seeing that Li Yundong wasn't thinking at this time, Su Chan boldly asked, "Yundong, what's wrong with you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Nothing." As he said this, he whispered to Su Chan, "Come to the room with me. Well, let's talk to the children. I'll go back to Suzhou on the 10th. I'll break out after I go back. It's really hard to write in Shenzhen. In addition, thank you to the children who voted for PK and VIP tickets. Tang Tang, I thank you very much. I wish you all good luck in the year of the rabbit, and all of you can cultivate to the Yangshan phase, haha." Chapter 430. Go to watch net. Su Chan rolled her eyes. Although she was puzzled, she still answered obediently and followed Li Yundong into the room. Go to watch net? Li Yundong entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. He gently patted his palm with the sealed bag in his right hand. He didn't speak to Su Chan, just had a serious look on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Although Su Chan was used to playing with Li Yundong, she didn't dare to play with him when she saw his frown and gloomy face. She just stood aside obediently and didn't make a sound to disturb him. After a while, Su Chan felt that the atmosphere in the room was so heavy that the air was about to freeze. She almost wanted to shout. At this time Li Yundong said, "Chaner, let me ask you again. Are you sure about what you told me before?" Su Chan nodded vigorously. "Yes, of course." Li Yundong was silent. After a long time he let out a long sigh. Seeing his worried face, Su Chan asked cautiously, "Yundong, don't be like this. I'm very worried. I still like you when you laugh cheerfully." Li Yundong shook his head, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "When I think that one of the 3 seniors of our Fox Zen school is a traitor, and that I have to find her and kill her with my own hands, I can't smile anymore." Su Chan was shocked in her heart, but she didn't show it. Instead, she took Li Yundong's arm and said softly, "Yundong, don't think too much. If you have any troubles and need my help, just tell me. I can also share your burden. I was very sad that you didn't tell me these things before." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "What are you sad about?" Su Chan pouted and said with a wronged expression, "Of course you told Zhou Qin and Ziyuan, but you didn't tell me. It's unfair. I was smart enough to find some clues." "I know you just think that I'm stupid, can't control my words and often cause trouble for you. I'm just a hindrance. But I'm trying hard to change." Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's eyes were filled with tears as she spoke, and his heart was filled with tenderness. He took the little girl's hand, gently held her hand and said softly, "Silly girl, do you know what I like most about you?" The little girl wiped her tears and thought for a moment. She rolled her eyes and deliberately said foolishly, "Do you like me because I'm beautiful?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Idiot, look at all the women in this room. Which one of them isn't beautiful? Isn't Zhou Qin pretty? Isn't Ziyuan beautiful? But why do I like you and not them?" Hearing this, Su Chan was secretly happy. She felt sweet in her heart as if she had eaten honey. She smiled and said, "What do you like about girls? It can't be that you like me being mischievous, right?" Li Yundong chuckled, pinched the tip of the little girl's nose with his hand, and said softly, "I just like your cuteness and purity. I like your innocence." We agreed that after we finished cultivation, we would fly together and travel all over the country. Do you still remember? Hearing this, Su Chan was fascinated. She suddenly remembered the days when she and Li Yundong had just met. Her smile suddenly became very warm and gentle. "Of course I remember. At that time, although the two of us lived a hard life, we really felt very happy at that time." Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed and said, "Yes, now I am the master of the Fox Zen school, the leader of a sect. We have also established our own foundation, but in the process, we have to be careful every step of the way. Now our situation seems peaceful, but in fact I feel that every step I take is like walking on thin ice. Moreover, at present, the internal and external troubles of the Fox Zen school are a thorn in my heart. I'm worried about it myself. How can I bear to let you worry about this kind of thing?" As he spoke, Li Yundong stroked the little girl's cheek lovingly and said softly, "What do you think will happen if my little girl loses her smile and happiness because of these things?" Su Chan was moved when she heard this. She held Li Yundong's hand tightly and said, "Even if I become like that, you can't abandon me. You can't abandon me." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Silly girl, don't talk nonsense. I will make you happy forever. Besides, I will not leave you no matter what you become." Su Chan's heart was overflowing with tenderness when she heard this. She leaned softly into his arms, raised her face, and looked at her lover with infatuation and love in her eyes. She said naively, "Yundong, kiss me." Li Yundong held the little girl's beautiful and charming face and gently pecked her rosy, pink lips. Although their lips and teeth separated as soon as they touched, they both felt that the taste was bone-piercing and made their hearts beat faster. Both Li Yundong and Su Chan knew that it was not the time for them to be intimate, so they separated and looked at each other and smiled. They felt that although the kiss was shallow, the sweetness in their hearts went deep into their hearts. It was as if this moment would last forever, and this moment would last until the end of time. Li Yundong held Su Chan in his arms. After a while he patted her on the shoulder and said softly, "Well, Chaner, help me call Chao Yi Sherbua here." Su Chan straightened up and said softly, "Yundong, why do you want to call Chao Yi Sherbua?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Don't you want to help me share some things?" "I'm asking for your help." Su Chan blinked. "What do you want me to do for you?" Li Yundong waved at Su Chan and motioned for her to come over. Then he whispered a few words in her ear. When Su Chan heard this, she was slightly shocked. "What are you going to do? Yundong, can you be sure?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Now the situation of our Fox Zen school is like hiding a snake in the grass. We know that there is a snake, but we don't know where it is. Therefore, if we keep waiting for the snake to appear on its own, the only result will be that the innocent people around us will be hurt. For example, President Chao. I still don't understand why she was attacked." Su Chan said thoughtfully, "Then Yundong, have you decided to?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, I want to alert the snake." Su Chan nodded and said, "I understand. I'll call Chao Yi Sherbua in later." As she spoke, she looked at Li Yundong with some worry and said, "Yundong, you have to pay attention to your own safety. Be careful." At this point, the little girl suddenly swallowed the rest of her words, as if she felt that she was being a little paranoid. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. I'm fine. You can go now." Su Chan went out of the door, walked over to Chao Yi and whispered a few words to her. Chao Yi was stunned and a strange look appeared on her face. However, she still smiled at Su Chan, then went upstairs and entered Li Yundong's room. The little foxes of the Fox Zen school did not notice this situation. In their opinion, it was normal for the leader to talk to their Sherbua. They were still talking and laughing. Su Chan saw that they were not paying attention, so she quietly flashed into Chao Yi's room. After entering the room, Su Chan twitched her nose slightly and kept searching for the smell of blood she had smelled before. Her sense of smell was extremely sensitive. After sniffing a few times in the room, she smelled a faint smell of blood in the air. The little girl's spirit was lifted, and she immediately followed the smell. Sure enough, in a hidden corner at the foot of the bed, she found a small package tightly wrapped in a plastic bag. Su Chan opened it and saw that it was the Taoist robe that Chao Yi had worn before. Su Chan nodded secretly, hid the package in her arms, and then quietly jumped out from behind the balcony of the room. The little girl jumped onto the balcony of Li Yundong's room and hid outside with her breath held. When Li Yundong coughed in the room, he said in a deep voice, "Little girl, don't hide. Come in." Su Chan gently pushed open the balcony and said with a smile, "Yundong, you are so powerful now. You can even detect my hidden aura." Li Yundong smiled and pointed outside the balcony, saying, "If you want to hide, how many people in the world can detect you? It was your shadow that betrayed you." Su Chan looked back and saw that the sunlight outside had cast a long oblique shadow on her figure. The little girl patted her head and said with some chagrin, "So that's how it is." Li Yundong smiled slightly and asked, "Have you found it?" Su Chan took out a package from her arms. Li Yundong took it and opened it. It was the Taoist robe that Chao Yi usually wore. Li Yundong looked carefully and saw a faint blood stain on the cuffs and ribs of the Taoist robe. Li Yundong nodded to himself. His face was as calm as water and he didn't say a word. The little girl next to him asked tentatively, "Yundong, what are you thinking? Is Chao Yi Sherbua really the traitor?" Li Yundong was silent for a long time. He sighed softly and said non-committally, "I think I already know who the traitor is." Su Chan immediately asked curiously, "Is it Chao Yi Sherbua?" Li Yundong glanced at her, touched her soft black hair and said softly, "Don't ask about these things. You shouldn't get involved in these intrigues. You have done what you can. Leave the rest to me. I will drive the snake out of our Fox Zen school." Su Chan curled up her lips and said reluctantly, "But I'm always worried. You should at least tell me some plans. It's not a big deal if I make a fool of myself, but if I ruin your plan, it will be a big deal." When Li Yundong heard this, he also felt that Su Chan's words made sense. Moreover, at this time it was time to reveal the dagger, so there was no need to hide it anymore. He thought for a moment, then said to Su Chan with a smile, "Do you know why Zhou Qin wants to go to the Zhuji phase at this time?" Su Chan blinked her eyes in confusion. "Isn't it because her cultivation has already reached the required level?" Li Yundong shook his head. "She can go tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. Why is she in such a hurry to go today?" Su Chan was a very smart woman. After being pointed out by Li Yundong, she immediately thought of what had happened to Chao Kefi before. Her eyes lit up and she let out a soft cry. Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Chaner, do you think Yen Fang will choose to continue to find a way to kill Chao Kefi or take back the Liuha sword that Zhou Qin is carrying?" Vote recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your opinion. Chapter 431. Go to WatchNet. After hearing Li Yundong's words, Su Chan couldn't help but be full of doubts for a while. She asked in confusion, "If it were me, of course I would go and grab the Liuha. Isn't my personal magical item more important? The Liuha is so powerful, why don't you go and grab it?" Li Yundong nodded slightly. "I think so too, so I asked Zhou Qin to carry the Liuha and set off now to lure the snake out of its hole. Go to WatchNet." 7 KOM. Su Chan suddenly asked, "But I don't understand. Why does Shirboy Yen Fang want to kill Chao Kefi?" At this time, Li Yundong's face darkened slightly. He said, "We will have the answer soon." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong's confident and deep face and suddenly felt a little worried. But out of absolute trust in Li Yundong, she buried the worry in her heart. The little girl couldn't figure it out. As a great cultivator of the Linggong sect, it was fine that Yen Fang made things difficult for the Fox Zen school, but why did she make things difficult for Chao Kefi, a weak girl who had no strength to truss a chicken? Moreover, every time she saw Chao Kefi, she always felt a sense of intimacy as if she knew her. It's strange. The little girl pouted slightly, tilted her head and murmured, "It seems that I'm not the only one who has this feeling. Are all the Shirbas the same?" Just as the little girl was puzzled, Zhou Qin had already packed up her luggage and embarked on the long and dangerous road of Zhuji phase. Zhou Qin walked to the door with her luggage on her back. She turned around and saw that the little foxes in the living room were all looking at her eagerly, their eyes full of envy. Li Yundong stood on the stairs of the second floor, standing like a pine tree and looking at her. In Zhou Qin's eyes, this young and handsome boy already had the bearing of a master. He stood on a high place and looked at her like a dignified elder, watching the younger generation go out on a long journey. Zhou Qin fixed her eyes on Li Yundong. She hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "Master, I'm leaving." Li Yundong looked at his classmate, this beautiful apprentice who had an ambiguous relationship with him, with a complicated look in his eyes. A month or two ago he had embarked on the journey of Zhuji phase. He was well aware of the difficulties and dangers involved. But soon, his first apprentice would embark on the dangerous journey he had experienced and go to the Himalayas to Zhuji phase. Half a year ago, she was just a rich young lady with a silver spoon in her mouth. Would she be able to withstand the test of a journey of more than 2,000 kilometers? Zhou Qin seemed to understand Li Yundong's worried gaze. She was a little nervous, but she suddenly smiled and said, "Master, don't worry. I will definitely come back safely. What you can do, I can also do. I won't embarrass you." The worry in Li Yundong's heart was diluted by her words. He smiled slightly and nodded to her. "Then I won't see you off." Zhou Qin nodded, turned around and walked out of the door, leaving only the people of the Fox Zen school in the room sighing. Zhuji phase was the most important threshold for cultivators, and there were countless variables. Even those who had cultivated the destiny connection could not predict what would happen to a person on the road to Zhuji phase. Since ancient times, there had been countless geniuses who had fallen on the road of Zhuji phase. No one knew if Zhou Qin would be the next one. Su Chan pulled Li Yundong's arm and whispered, "Yundong, do you think Sister Zhou Qin can smoothly reach the Zhuji phase? Isn't it a little difficult for her to go to such a dangerous place on her first Zhuji phase?" Li Yundong sighed softly and said, "The fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Zhou Qin is proud and arrogant. A person like her is not suitable to be cultivated in a warm room. She should face the cruelest and most dangerous challenges in the world. Only in this way can she complete her transformation and become a great cultivator." I believe that she can get through this challenge, and I also believe that she can defeat herself. While Li Yundong and Su Chan were talking, Zhou Qin had already left the community and was trotting along the road, heading straight in the direction of Tibet. It was winter at this time. Although Tianan City was a southern city because of the cold current, most of the citizens of Tianan City had already put on winter clothes, and they all looked a little bloated. However, only Zhou Qin was wearing a single shirt and pants. Her long hair, which had originally been draped over her shoulders, was also tied up high, revealing a large snow-white neck. This young lady was carrying a cloth bag on her back, which contained a few changes of clothes. In the cloth bag there was a long sword wrapped in black cloth. In her pocket there was 1,000 yuan. Other than that there was nothing else. Zhou Qin trotted all the way with her bag on her back. Her beautiful face and strange attire attracted the attention of countless passers-by. People were guessing where this beautiful woman, who seemed to be going on a long journey, was going. At first there was a man who was shocked by Zhou Qin's appearance. Some men wanted to follow Zhou Qin and conspire against her. However, Zhou Qin was a virgin Shenin cauldron, a good cultivation cauldron that was 1 in a million. Moreover, she had the help of the Renyuan Jindan. Ever since the Renyuan Jindan had transformed her body, her physical strength was not inferior to Li Yundong's. In addition, she had Li Yundong's careful guidance, which had helped her open up the 8 extra meridians of her body. At this time when she ran she was like a small sports car with full horsepower. She ran for more than 10 kilometers but she did not feel tired at all. At first, the few men who could follow behind her only followed her for more than 10 minutes. Their faces were full of shock as they watched Zhou Qin's back disappear into the dust. Zhou Qin ran all the way out of Tianan City, and then slowly slowed down. Just like Li Yundong's Yuji phase, she stood at the edge of the city, looked back at the bustling metropolis, and then looked at the road in front of her, which was already a desolate suburb. Suddenly, Zhou Qin felt an inexplicable emotion and melancholy in her heart. For the first time she experienced the state of mind and feelings that Li Yundong had felt when he was in the Zhuji phase. On an uncertain journey in the vast world she had no one to rely on. When she looked up she saw the sky. When she bent down there was only mud. How small a person was. And cultivators were embarking on such a dangerous path, trying to conquer heaven and earth, trying to surpass life and death. What kind of lofty sentiments and lofty aspirations did this require? What kind of courage and boldness did it require? When she went to Tibet to cultivate, at least she had her own family backing her up and Li Yundong, a powerful master, supporting her. But at that time, Li Yundong had no one to rely on, and the only person close to him, Su Chan, had been forced to separate from him. How did he overcome this kind of lovesickness? How did he overcome the dangers of heaven and earth, and successfully build the Zhuji phase? The further Zhou Qin went on the road of cultivation, the more she admired Li Yundong. There were some things that she could only know the horror and difficulty of after she had experienced them herself. Zhou Qin stood by the side of the road and looked at Tianan City. From time to time there were speeding cars passing by. Some of them even stopped by the side of the road and asked Zhou Qin loudly if she needed a ride. But Zhou Qin turned a deaf ear to them. She just looked at the city she was familiar with blurred eyes, and then walked away from the bustling world step by step. Zhou Qin followed Li Yundong's footsteps all the way west. Before she knew it, it was already night. At this time the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Zhou Qin had already gotten off the highway and entered a barren forest that she couldn't name. She found a remote place and tidied up the surrounding environment a little. Then she sat down cross-legged and prepared to start qi. But as soon as she entered meditation, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine, and her hair stood on end. There seemed to be a pair of eyes staring at her in the dark. Zhou Qin suddenly opened her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were bright and clear. She said in a clear voice, "Come out, who is it?" In this quiet night, Zhou Qin's voice was sent far away. For a moment the birds and insects were shocked. There was a dead silence all around and there was no response. Zhou Qin's eyes swept across the dark night. She snorted and took out the liuha from her bag. She sneered and said, "Still not coming out? Do you want to force me to release my powerful magical weapon? This magic weapon of mine was personally passed down to me by my master. I don't need to activate it to slay demons and subdue devils. Once I release it, it won't return to its sheath without seeing blood. I advise you to show yourself to avoid any misunderstandings." As soon as she finished speaking, she saw the figure of a woman appear faintly in the dark night. The woman was graceful, and the corners of her clothes were fluttering, making her look a little elegant and ethereal. Zhou Qin glanced at her with the help of the moonlight and saw that the woman was extremely beautiful. Her eyes were sharp as if they were real. When she looked at her, Zhou Qin's heart shook and her eyes hurt slightly. Zhou Qin was shocked. She knew that the cultivator in front of her must be a powerful character. At least, her cultivation and kung fu were not inferior to Li Yundong's. Zhou Qin frowned and asked, "Who are you? Why are you following me in the middle of the night?" The woman didn't look at Zhou Qin. She just looked at the liuha in her hand. After a long time, she sneered and said, "You said that this sword was passed down to you by your master?" Zhou Qin said in a deep voice, "That's right." The woman raised her head and laughed. "Do you know that this sword was passed down to me by my master?" Zhou Qin's expression froze. "Are you Yen Fong?" Yen Fong smiled coldly. "Your reaction is fast. Humph, that little bastard Li Yundong actually dared to let you carry the liuha in the street? He really thinks too highly of you." Zhou Qin didn't say anything. She just held the sword in her hand and slowly pulled it out. The blade of the liuha rubbed against the scabbard, making a clanging sound, and it was full of murderous intent. When Zhou Qin completely pulled the sword out of the scabbard, the liuha let out a series of buzzing sounds, eager to have a try. It jumped into the air and pointed the sword at Yen Fong. Zhou Qin said coldly, "Yen Fong, I know that you are also a pitiful person. You have hidden your identity for 9 years in order to take revenge. Now that Ao Wushuang has been sealed by you and Lu Yi has been killed by you, the Fox Zen school is now beyond recognition. What else can you not let go of? As the saying goes, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. The sea of bitterness is boundless, so repent and you will be saved. It has not been easy for you to cultivate for so many years. Don't be blinded by hatred and lose your cultivation overnight." Yen Fong laughed out loud. Li Yundong is a sharp-tongued guy. I didn't expect that his disciple would also be the master of a battle of words. The two of you, master and disciple, are well matched. Yen Fong laughed for a while. Suddenly, her face became serious and her eyes were full of killing intent. She said ferociously, "Zhou Qin, don't think that you can talk to me with a straight back just because your background is strong enough. Let me tell you, you are now a cultivator. If I kill you, I won't be punished by heaven. Moreover, this powerful magical weapon was originally mine. Your master had the cheek to take it for himself. Today I am just returning it to its original owner." Zhou Qin retorted sarcastically without showing any weakness. "The magical weapons in the world belong to those who can. You can't protect your Dharma artifact, yet you say such sour words. Can you even be considered a cultivator?" Yen Fong couldn't help but be furious. She shouted, "The magical weapons in the world belong to those who can. Then I'll take them back today." Chapter 432. Go to WatchNet. Yen Fong quickly pinched her fingers and threw out 2 talismans. These 2 talismans flew in the air and burned by themselves. Then the flames of the 2 talismans continued to grow, and 2 golden people quickly emerged from the flames. Go to WatchNet. Zhou Qin saw that these 2 people were covered in golden armor. One was holding a steel whip, and the other was holding an iron tower. They looked dignified and awe-inspiring, like gods who had descended to the world. This was the first time in her life that she had fought with others. Zhou Qin couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Yen Fong was such a character that she immediately noticed the fleeting uneasiness in Zhou Qin's heart. She laughed and said, "Are you afraid now? Humph, do you think I can't do anything to you just because you have the liuha in your hand? Even a good powerful magical weapon depends on the person using it. If the liuha falls into your hands, you can only exert 30% of its power at best. You'd better surrender obediently and I'll spare your life. I'm going to take this liuha." Zhou Qin pinched her arm hard with her fingers. She took a deep breath and gradually calmed her pounding heart. With a shake of her arm, she shook off the bundle behind her. She grabbed the chiwei in one hand and the Vulcan's whip in the other. Her sharp eyes pierced through the 2 golden armored warriors and stared at Yen Fong. Seeing her like this, Yen Fong couldn't help sneering and saying, "You really won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. You haven't even reached the Zhuji phase and you don't have any spiritual power at all. If you were to use this chainsaw Vajra wheel, it would be a powerful magical weapon, but if you use it now, be careful not to hurt yourself." Zhou Qin didn't talk nonsense with her. She shouted loudly, holding the Vulcan's whip like a halberd. She pointed at Yen Fong and shouted, "Liuha, eliminate evil." The sword was psychic, and it had been ordered by Li Yundong to protect Zhou Qin. Therefore, as soon as Zhou Qin gave the order, the liuha buzzed with a dragon roar and instantly split into 2 long swords. They turned into two beams of white light and rushed toward the two golden-armored warriors like lightning. The two golden-armored warriors also shouted at the same time. One waved the steel whip in his hand and fought with one of the Lioha swords. The other shook his arm and the iron tower in his hand rose high. Then, in an instant, it covered all the Lioha swords that were pouncing on him. The golden-armored warrior holding the tower quickly pinched his fingers and muttered something, as if he was reciting a spell. Soon there was a burst of red light in the iron tower, as if there were flames refining the Lioha. The Lioha was shrouded by the iron tower. Like a dragon caught in a net, it struggled wildly and made a series of rumbling sounds. The earth trembled and from a distance, one could see a steady stream of red light emerging from the foot of the mountain. When Yanfang saw that one of the two Lioha was entangled and the other was trapped, she immediately laughed complacently and said, "Zhou Qin, are you still not going to surrender?" But as soon as she finished speaking, she heard a whooshing sound in front of her. Yanfang took a closer look and saw that it was the cold and beautiful chainsaw Vajra wheel making an ear-piercing and sharp sound of breaking through the air, quickly chopping towards her. Zhou Qin followed closely behind. With a shake of her arm, the Vulcan's whip in her hand rushed straight toward her face. Yanfang was furious. She had never thought that Zhou Qin, a woman who had not yet reached the Zhuji phase, would dare to take the initiative to attack her. He simply didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Without thinking, Yanfang grabbed the spinning chiwe with one hand and accurately caught it in her hand. With 2 fingers of her other hand, she clamped the tip of the Vulcan's whip between her fingers. Yanfang knew that Zhou Qin had not yet reached the Zhuji phase at this time. Although these 2 powerful magical weapons were powerful, they were no different from ordinary weapons at this time. That was why she dared to catch them with her bare hands. As soon as she caught them, she couldn't help feeling proud in her heart. She thought to herself, "Let's see what else you can do." As soon as this thought came to Yanfang's mind, she saw Zhou Qin suddenly let go of the Vulcan's whip in her hand. With a stomp of her feet, she rushed to her like a cannonball and fiercely stabbed her eyes with 2 fingers. Yanfang was shocked and angry. She hadn't expected that Zhou Qin would be so fierce that she would dare to fight hand-to-hand with her. What she didn't know was that Zhou Qin had seen Li Yundong fight hand-to-hand with others several times. That was why she was shocked by Li Yundong's amazing skills and developed a strong curiosity about him. That was why she slowly fell in love with this boy. As the saying goes, like teacher, like disciple. Li Yundong was a cultivator who was very good at hand-to-hand combat. He had defeated the strong several times and turned defeat into victory by relying on his indomitable hand-to-hand combat skills. As Li Yundong's eldest direct disciple, Zhou Qin naturally inherited Li Yundong's fierce style. Moreover, she was resolute and courageous. She didn't make a move, but when she did, she immediately used a cruel and fierce killing move. Li Yundong knew that Zhou Qin was going to go on a long journey. He was afraid that Zhou Qin would run into people with bad intentions along the way, so before leaving he specially taught her some self-defense skills. The most vulnerable part of a person's body was not the genitals, nor the temples, but the eyes. Cultivators could cultivate their bodies to become extremely strong through cultivation. Although they didn't dare to say that they were invulnerable to bullets, water and fire, their ability to resist attacks could far exceed that of ordinary people. However, no matter how powerful a person was, it was impossible for him to cultivate all his magic to a pair of eyes. People who had undergone special training were able to withstand the blows of iron hammers and even the slashes of steel knives. However, their eyes were extremely fragile. If a child used a little strength to poke their eyes, they would still be blind. Zhou Qin's move was to attack the enemy's death gate. It could be said that it was vicious. Although Yanfang was an experienced cultivator, she was also shocked by Zhou Qin's cruelty. She immediately let go of the hand holding the tip of the Vulcan's whip and put her palm upright in front of her face. Her palm happened to be stuck between Zhou Qin's fingers, blocking her fingers from stabbing her eyes. Yanfang hated Zhou Qin for being so vicious. Her other hand, which was holding the chakram, immediately swiped at Zhou Qin's waist and abdomen. As long as the sharp edge of the chakram grazed the chakram, Zhou Qin would immediately be cut open. But when Zhou Qin saw that Yanfang was going straight to her waist and abdomen, she gritted her teeth and didn't dodge. Then she punched Yanfang's heart again. This punch condensed almost all of Zhou Qin's strength. With a whoosh, it made a faint sound of breaking through the air. In an instant, Yanfang even had an illusion that the power of this punch was like a cannonball fired from a cannon. As long as her chest was hit, even though she had a yang spirit body, she would be blown to pieces. At this time, Yanfang couldn't help but be shocked. She knew that Zhou Qin was simply fighting with all her might, exchanging her life for her life. Although her yang spirit would be destroyed, it could be reshaped by her soul consciousness. Although her cultivation would be greatly reduced, she would not die. However, Zhou Qin had not yet reached the Zhuji phase. If her physical body was destroyed, she would die. Killing 10,000 enemies at the expense of 3,000 oneself was not worth the loss. However, Zhou Qin was killing 3,000 enemies at the expense of 10,000 oneself. Yen Fang was shocked and thought to herself, "Is this guy crazy?" Yen Fang was shocked and hesitated a little. When the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand touched Zhou Qin's waist and abdomen, it was a little slower. With this delay, Zhou Qin's fist had already hit Yen Fang's heart. Yen Fang's body shook violently, and she quickly took a step back, reducing the power of Zhou Qin's fist by more than half. However, the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand also retreated. The sharp blade brushed past the white and smooth skin between her waist and abdomen, and the cold saber chi pierced Zhou Qin's skin and made her hair stand on end. Zhou Qin had just escaped from the gates of hell, but she did not feel afraid at all. Instead, she turned her body and caught the tip of the Vulcan's whip that Yen Fang had thrown down with one hand. With the other hand, she turned her palm, and her 5 fingers were like knives, fiercely stabbing Yen Fang's genitals. The genitals were the most important and weakest part of the human body. Cultivators wanted to refine essence into qi, and the source of all qi was from the Huyin acupoint. If Zhou Qin, who had been reconstructed by Jindan, were to use this mercilessly, it would be no different from being stabbed by a steel knife. From then on, the leakless body would become the 5 leakless body, and even if she didn't die, she would become a cripple. Yen Fang was furious. She immediately flew up and kicked Zhou Qin's back. If this kick landed, Zhou Qin's spine would immediately be shattered, and she would be paralyzed in bed from then on, unable to move anymore. Zhou Qin heard the wind behind her. Without thinking about it, she still didn't dodge. Instead, the hand that was stabbing into Yen Fang's genitals moved a little faster. Seeing that Zhou Qin was going to perish together with her, Yen Fang was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She had no choice but to withdraw her foot in the middle of the fight. The chakram in her hand chopped down at Zhou Qin's arm like an axe. At this time, Zhou Qin suddenly turned over and threw out the Vulcan's whip in her hand. The whip wrapped around Yen Fang's chiwa. She pulled it hard with her hand and shouted, "Let go!" At the same time, she quickly turned over and stabbed Yen Fang's eyes with her fingers like a halberd. Yen Fang only felt a huge force coming from her hand, followed by Zhou Qin's loud shout. She immediately sneered and thought, "You want to compete with me in strength? You want me to let go?" But as soon as she exerted her strength to take back the sawtooth Vajra wheel, she saw Zhou Qin turn around and stab her eyes with her fingers. Yen Fang was suddenly shocked and angry. She knew that she had fallen into the opponent's trick of diversion. Zhou Qin shouted to let go as if she wanted to snatch the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand, but in fact she wanted to use this as a cover to continue to blind her eyes. Yen Fang saw that Zhou Qin's every move was aimed at the vital parts of the human body. Every move was dangerous and vicious, extremely ferocious and ferocious. It didn't look like a move that a woman who had just started to cultivate could make. Yen Fang was shocked. She was shocked by Zhou Qin's fierce attack, and also shocked by Zhou Qin's desperate fighting style. She had dozens of magic arts that could easily kill Zhou Qin, but because of a moment of carelessness, she was actually at a disadvantage in close combat with Zhou Qin. Yen Fang couldn't help but feel hatred in her heart. She glanced at the Liuhe with hatred and thought, "When I had the Liuhe in my hand, I suppressed all the heroes on Mount Gazao alone. How powerful I was! Who would have thought that he would be beaten back by a little girl's chaotic punches?" But Yen Fang was, after all, an experienced cultivator. She made a prompt decision and immediately threw down the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand. With a stomp of her feet, her body floated more than 20 meters away in an instant. Although Zhou Qin was fierce, she had not reached the Zhuji phase after all, and her cultivation kung fu had not reached a higher level. Close combat was a dangerous fight. Whoever could fight harder would have a greater chance of winning. This was the saying, an inch shorter, an inch more dangerous. But Yen Fang decisively gave up the magical item in her hand. In an instant, her body floated more than 20 meters away, and the distance between her and Zhou Qin was widened. Zhou Qin wanted to chase after her again, but she didn't have such a good opportunity as before. This distance of 20 meters was like a chasm between Zhou Qin and Yen Fang. No matter how fast Zhou Qin rushed over, no matter what fierce and desperate moves she used, Yen Fang could calmly kill Zhou Qin with her own magic. This was also the saying, an inch longer, an inch stronger. After Yin Fang left the battlefield, she looked at Zhou Qin in surprise and doubt. Finally, there was no contempt on her face. She knew that Zhou Qin's cultivation talent was outstanding, but she hadn't expected that a rich young lady like Zhou Qin, who had been raised in luxury, would be so fierce and desperate when fighting with others. Even the bearded man was not as good as her. At this time, Yin Fang had vaguely regarded Zhou Qin as an extremely difficult enemy to deal with, and no longer regarded her as a rookie who had not yet reached the Zhuji phase. Yin Fang's face was serious, and her eyes were full of killing intent. She thought to herself, once such a person's cultivation is successful, she will definitely become Li Yundong's right-hand man, but also my own enemy. Zhou Qin can't be left alive. She must be killed. Groups 1 to 10 are full. Don't join them if you want to join the group, please add 134426916. Chapter 433. Go to WatchNet. Once Yin Fang got serious, Zhou Qin would have no chance of winning. After all, sometimes the gap in strength could not be made up by risking one's life. WatchNet. 7KOM. This cultivator of the Linggong sect was once known as the most outstanding female cultivator in the cultivation world in the past 100 years. She had reached the Zhuji phase at the age of 12 and the Yangshan phase at the age of 14. Her talent was so high that it was a legend in the cultivation world at that time. She and Wang Yuanshan were once regarded by the cultivation world as the most enviable immortal couple. In the future they would be husband and wife, a harmonious couple. Yin Fang of the Linggong sect was said to be unparalleled at that time. She was faintly regarded as the future #1 female cultivator in the world. But no one expected that Wang Yuanshan would eventually meet Ao Wushuang. From then on, the Linggong sect fell apart, and Wang Yuanshan disappeared. In order to take revenge, Yin Fang hid her identity for 9 years. The great reputation she had made in the past was gradually forgotten. At this moment, this former genius was seriously sizing up the young woman who had only cultivated for a month. Her eyes were filled with shock and hostility. In Yin Fang's opinion, although Ziyuan's talent was not inferior to hers, she was indifferent and aloof from worldly affairs. She only wanted to become an immortal. Although her future cultivation was limitless, she was her martial niece after all. It was impossible for her to deal with her ruthlessly. In fact, she could not pose much of a threat to her. Although Li Yundong is a genius, it will be difficult for him to do it alone. With me sniping in the dark, it will be difficult for him to carry forward the Fox Zen school. However, Yin Fang did not expect that Zhou Qin would suddenly emerge as a new force. Her talent in cultivation and fighting methods was shocking. The scariest thing was that this girl was the daughter of a wealthy family, the descendant of an official. Once she grew up, with her background and strength, she would definitely become a fearsome character in the cultivation world. When the power of cultivation was combined with royal power, the power it catalyzed was unimaginable to anyone. Yin Fang looked at Zhou Qin seriously and said slowly, "Zhou Qin, apart from Ziyuan, you are the most talented female cultivator I've ever seen. It stands to reason that the cultivation world is declining now. It should be a great blessing for the cultivation world to have a talent like you, but..." Yin Fang took a deep breath and sighed, "But unfortunately, I have to kill you with my own hands. Because you are helping the wicked." Zhou Qin sneered and said, "Do you think that you are the only one in the world who is righteous and everyone else is evil? What makes you think you're doing the right thing?" Yin Fang snorted coldly and said, "I won't argue with you. If you have any last words, just say them now." It was the first time that Zhou Qin had faced such a powerful enemy. She did not panic at all. Instead, she stood tall and looked at Yin Fang calmly. She held the Vulcan's whip in one hand and the Chiwei in the other, saying proudly, "If you have the ability, come at me." Yin Fang said, "Humph, do you think I will give you a chance to get close to me? Let me tell you, with your current cultivation level, even 100 of you wouldn't be my match." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly heard an elegant and quiet voice in the dark night. "What if I'm included?" As soon as Yin Fang heard the voice, a glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. "Ziyuan?" She turned her head and saw a woman in white slowly walking out of the night. The woman was wearing a long dress, her black hair piled up like clouds, and her figure was as ethereal as a fairy. It was Ziyuan. There was a threatening chill in Yin Fang's voice. She said coldly, "Ziyuan, are you really determined to go against me? Have you ever thought about what Shixiang would think if he knew what you had done?" Ziyuan looked at Yin Fang with a complicated look in her eyes. She sighed softly and said, Sherbua, as the saying goes, it's better to get rid of enmity than to keep it alive. I think you'd better let go. Yin Fang raised her head and laughed. You're talking nonsense again. You're a good person, but you're so sentimental. Ziyuan, let me tell you, when I uncover the big conspiracy of the Fox Zen school one day, you'll know whether I'm right or wrong. Ziyuan's face was as dark as water. She said, Sherbua, whether it's a conspiracy or not is another matter for the time being. But what did Zhou Qin do to make you want to kill her so badly that you want to kill her? Yin Fang said sternly, this woman can't tell right from wrong. She doesn't know good from evil. She's helping the wicked. Everyone has the right to punish her. Ziyuan asked faintly, Sherbua, may I ask who this person is? Who was this Zhou who was helping the evildoer? Also, how did she abuse her? If you have any real evidence, please show it to me. I will not be partial to her. Yin Fang sneered and said, helping the wicked is a great evil. There's no need for real evidence. Ziyuan sighed softly and said, Sherbua, this is your fault. As cultivators, we naturally have to be reasonable in our actions and words. As the saying goes, if you are reasonable, you can walk all over the world. If you are unreasonable, you can't do anything. Sherbua, although you are my elder, please forgive me for being rude. You can't touch a single hair of Zhou Qin's. Yin Fang laughed angrily and said, good, good, good. I've long wanted to see your kung fu. I don't know if your kung fu has improved. However, to be honest, I know your Shintong kung fu very well, but do you know what kind of Shintong kung fu I've been practicing in the past 9 years? Ziyuan said faintly, just now, Sherbua, you used the Liujia God-inviting talisman to invite the gods to descend to the world. This kind of high-level talisman is clearly the kung fu of the Maoshan sect. I think your kung fu has already passed through the two great Taoist sects of Jingyi and Maoshan. Even if you don't have the Liuha in your hand, you can already be called a great cultivator. Yin Fang snorted and said, it's good that you know. Do you think that I can't do anything to you because you have a helper? Ziyuan suddenly smiled and said, Sherbua, do you know why I'm here? Yin Fang frowned slightly. Her eyes narrowed and she said in a cold voice, could it be that Li Yundong arranged this? Ziyuan looked at the Liuha, which was still fighting with the two heavenly soldiers. She smiled slightly and said, Sherbua, you've fallen into Li Yundong's trap of luring the snake out of its hole. The reason why he gave the Liuha to Zhou Qin is that he wants her to protect herself and that he wants to lure you out. Yin Fang was not angry when she heard this. Instead, she laughed and said, what a good trick of luring the snake out of its hole. He actually used his own direct disciple as bait. This master is really competent. Seeing that Yin Fang was trying to sow discord, Zhou Qin snorted coldly and said, Master told me this at the beginning. Do you think I don't know how dangerous this matter is? Humph, with a thorn like you by his side, Master can't sleep or eat in peace. As long as I can get rid of you, not to mention putting myself in danger, even if I have to go through a mountain of knives and a sea of fire, I will still go through it. Yin Fang suddenly looked at Zhou Qin with some emotion. At this moment, she seemed to see herself in the past, the infatuated woman who could do anything for the person she loved. For a moment, Yin Fang's heart felt as if it had been overturned. She felt a trace of emotion for Zhou Qin, but also a trace of resonance from recalling the past. She saw that Zhou Qin could even give up her life for Li Yundong. If she tried to sow discord, it would really be asking for humiliation. Understanding this, Yin Fang snorted coldly and stopped trying to sow discord. She sneered and said, even if I fell into the trap of luring the snake, so what? What can you do to me? However, Ziyuan asked back, Sherbua, you said that in order to lure you out, we painstakingly set up such a trap. How can we not have a foolproof plan? It's true that I'm not as good as you in terms of fighting. Even with Zhou Qin we may not be your match, but why do you think that Li Yundong won't show up for such a big thing? Yin Fang's face changed drastically. She said in surprise, is that little bastard Li Yundong here too? As soon as she finished speaking, she saw a figure walking out of the thick night behind Ziyuan, staring at Yin Fang fiercely. Was Li Yundong. When Yin Fang saw Li Yundong, she was slightly shocked. She gritted her teeth and said, sure enough, this little bastard is here too. Ziyuan had a wise look on her face. She smiled and said, Sherbua, do you still have a chance of winning now? Although Yin Fang was angry in her heart, she knew very well that if she fought against Li Yundong, she would still have a 50-50 chance of winning. But if Ziyuan was added to the mix and there was also Zhou Qin who was desperate and always wanted to exchange her life for her life, then she would have absolutely no chance of winning at all. Moreover, Yin Fang had been lurking around Li Yundong these days. She knew best about Li Yundong's cultivation strength at this time. Not to mention anything else, just at the opening ceremony of the Desanxian, Li Yundong's move of the divine dragon playing with water had forced the Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhang Ling, to retreat. At that time when she saw it upstairs, she was also shocked to the point that her scalp went numb. At that time the ordinary people watching the fun in the tea house didn't know what it was, but she, Yin Fang, knew what it was. She knew how terrifying it was to be able to do this. In the face of such a powerful opponent, her momentum was really a little discouraged before the fight even started. As soon as Yin Fang's momentum weakened, Zhou Qin was keenly aware of it. She immediately shouted aggressively, "Yin Fang, hand over the Emperor's clock and release Ao Wushuang. Otherwise today will be the day you die." Yin Fang laughed angrily and said, "How dare you, a rookie who has just entered the sect, yell at me?" As she said this, she turned to Ziyuan and sneered, "Ziyuan, do you think your plan of alerting the enemy and luring the snake out of its hole is very clever?" Ziyuan said, "It's not very clever, but it works." Yin Fang sneered and said, "Do you think I can't see through your little tricks? You gave the Liuha to a little girl who hasn't even reached the Zhuji phase, and you did it in front of me. Do you think I can't see what Li Yundong is up to?" Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "Even so, Shirboy, you still showed up, didn't you? The Liuha is too important to you. You knew it was a trap, but you still jumped into it." Yin Fang laughed and said, "So what if I showed up? The world is so big. I can come and go as I please. Who can stop me? Moreover, if you can use this trick of alerting the snake out of its hole, can't I beat you at your own game and use the trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain?" Ziyuan's face changed. She said, "Shirbo, what do you mean by that?" Yin Fang smiled proudly and said, "Ziyuan, you don't understand anything at all. Compared with the Liuha, Chao Kefi's life is more important to me. I don't want the Liuha, but she must die." Ziyuan couldn't help but say angrily, "Shirbo, Chao Kefi is just a secular mortal. Why do you keep making things difficult for her?" Yin Fang sneered, "A secular mortal? Have you ever seen a secular mortal with only one soul and 3 spirits? As far as I know, the big conspiracy of the Fox Zen school is closely related to Chao Kefi. Humph, I came here today to steal the Liuha, not for anything else, but to get you away from Chao Kefi so that I can make a move." Ziyuan said, "Shirbo, even if you can get us out when you fly back, we can also fly back with you. At most we will arrive together. How can you do it?" Yin Fang laughed and said, "Ziyuan, you saw me use the talisman magic of the Maoshan sect just now. You have read all the cultivation classics since you were 13 years old. Don't you know that there is a magic called shrinking earth into an inch in the talisman magic of the Maoshan sect?" After that, Yin Fang suddenly took out a talisman from her sleeve. With a loud shout, she pinched her fingers together, and the talisman began to burn by itself in the blink of an eye, emitting a dazzling yellow light. This burst of yellow light was so dazzling that Zhou Qin couldn't help but cover her eyes with her hands and close them tightly. When she saw the yellow light disappear, she opened her eyes, only to see that there was no one in front of her. Even the 2 6-armor heavenly soldiers that Yin Fang had summoned before had disappeared. Zhou Qin was shocked. "Oh no, Yin Fang ran away." Vote recommendation previous page, return to directory next page error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 434. Please remember the domain name of this site. Or search on Baidu Sanlian Literature Network, Zhou Qin shouted. She subconsciously turned to look in the direction of Tianan City, then looked at Li Yundong eagerly and shouted, "Master, chase after her." Yin Fang ran back to kill President Chao. However, Li Yundong stood where he was, turning a deaf ear to her and not moving at all. Zhou Qin was very anxious. She rushed to Li Yundong, grabbed his shoulder with both hands, shook it hard and said loudly, "Master, say something." But as soon as she finished speaking, she saw Li Yundong's body suddenly shake, and then his whole body was ignited in flames. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared, leaving only a burning talisman in the air, slowly falling down. Zhou Qin was stunned. She stared at the talisman that had fallen to the ground and burned to ashes. She stammered, What's going on?" Zhou Qin turned to look at Ziyuan and said loudly, "Ziyuan, what the hell is going on?" Ziyuan couldn't help but laugh softly. "Zhou Qin, this Li Yundong is fake." Zhou Qin was tongue-tied. "Fake? Is this magic?" Ziyuan nodded slightly and said, Yes, this is the Liujia Yang spirit talisman. Li Yundong and I had a private discussion. We decided to set up an ambush on both sides and wait for Yanfang to appear. However, if I appeared alone, I wouldn't be able to scare Yanfang away. Therefore I made a fake Li Yundong to help me. Hey, as I expected, Yanfang immediately fell into the trap. Zhou Qin couldn't help but ask, but why does Yanfang want to make life difficult for Chao Kefi? Ziyuan frowned slightly. She frowned and thought for a while, then said, I'm not sure about this, but when I first saw Chao Kefi, I felt that this woman was too coquettish, and she only had one soul and 3 spirits in her body, which was different from ordinary people. Now it seems that Chao Kefi has a good relationship with the Fox Zen school, and I saw that when the Sherpa of the Fox Zen school saw Chao Kefi, they all looked shocked. Obviously they knew Chao Kefi. Zhou Qin opened her mouth wide, her face full of disbelief. No way President Chao is from the Fox Zen school? Then she is also a... The word vixen had a derogatory connotation, so Zhou Qin didn't say it in the end. However, Ziyuan shook her head and said, no, if it's a fox demon body, there will be demonic qi all over her body, and I can easily detect it. But what puzzled me was that Chao Kefi didn't have a trace of fox spirit aura on her. Why did she have a connection with the Fox Zen school? Why did she only have 1 spiritual soul and 3 physical forms? This is unbelievable. Zhou Qin thought for a moment and said tentatively, shall I ask President Chao another day? Ziyuan smiled and said, Zhou Qin, the most important thing for you now is to build the Zhuji phase. You don't have to worry about anything else. Think about it, when your master Li Yundong was in the Zhuji phase, he sold his phone so that he wouldn't miss her. You can't go on the road with worries in your heart. Otherwise, if you are half-hearted, you will definitely suffer from qi deviation. Zhou Qin's expression turned serious. I've learned something. I understand. I'll leave Yanfang's matter to you, Ziyuan. Ziyuan smiled and said, you don't have to be so polite. If nothing unexpected happens, we will be able to find out the traitor of the Fox Zen school tonight. Zhou Qin seemed to have thought of something and asked, but Yanfang has the body of Yang spirit. She can come and go freely and her speed is extremely fast. Moreover, she used the body of Yang spirit to kill Chao Kefi. How do you know which one is her real body? Ziyuan smiled confidently and said, we have our own ways to force her to show her real body. Zhou Qin subconsciously wanted to ask more questions, but she didn't want to show that she didn't know anything in front of Ziyuan, so she held back the question and said, I know, but it's a pity that I can't help master. Ziyuan shook her head slightly and said with a chuckle, no, you have already helped Li Yundong a lot by putting yourself in danger. Although he didn't say it, he knew it very well in his heart. Moreover, neither Li Yundong nor I can help you anymore in the future. You have to go on by yourself. Zhou Qin knew that Ziyuan, who was like a fairy in front of her, had once begged alms for thousands of miles and finally succeeded in the Zhuji phase after going through all kinds of hardships. She thought to herself, if Ziyuan can do it, why can't I? Thinking of this, Zhou Qin's chest suddenly became full of pride. She smiled and said, please tell master to wait for my good news. I will definitely succeed in the Zhuji phase. Ziyuan nodded slightly and smiled. Then she turned into a beam of blue light and left in an instant, leaving Zhou Qin alone in the night of the barren mountain. She looked up at the direction in which Ziyuan had left, lost in thought. Just as Zhou Qin was embarking on her cultivation journey again, in the advanced nursing ward of the Second People's Hospital of Tianan City, Chao Kefi was texting Lu Feier on her mobile phone. Lu Feier's text message said, Sister Chao, I've already returned to the crew. The director is scolding you. Chao Kefi smiled, pressed her fingers lightly, and quickly sent a text message back. When does this guy not scold people? Besides, I don't believe that he only scolds me and not you. Lu Feier texted back, yes, he scolded everyone in the crew once and I was scolded twice. He's so fierce. Chao Kefi replied with a smile, why, do you regret it? Why did you insist on following me back then? Lu Feier sent a grimacing emoji. I don't regret it. This trip has broadened my horizons. From now on, I can be considered a knowledgeable person. I know that there is a master like Li Yundong in this world, so I didn't get scolded for nothing. In my opinion, these guys in the crew are the frogs at the bottom of the well. They are all ignorant. Chao Kefi couldn't help laughing. You little girl, you're brilliant with a little sunshine. You've only seen him once and you think you're knowledgeable? Do you know how he got his kung fu skills? I don't even know. I don't even dare to say that I'm knowledgeable. You little girl, aren't you afraid of blowing your own trumpet? Lu Feier replied, as the saying goes, if one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening without regrets. Seeing some things once is enough. Anyway, I think I've broadened my horizons. Chow Kefi scolded with a smile, since you've achieved the Tao, then go to hell. Don't make a fool of yourself here. Lu Feier sent another grimacing emoji. Then I'm going to die. I'm going to sleep until I die. Sister Chow, you have to be careful. Don't lose your soul again. You have to ask Li Yundong to help you find your soul. After reading this message, the smile on Chow Kefi's face suddenly sank. This beautiful and strong woman had countless pursuers, including many outstanding business elites and handsome and sunny men. However, she had fallen for this young boy who was still a little green at first glance. Especially during the period when Li Yundong was missing, she was really lost every day. It took a long time for her to recover. It wasn't until she met him again that her soul seemed to have really come back. Especially 2 days ago, she really lost her soul for a while, and it was really Li Yundong who found her soul. Is this guy really my enemy in my previous life? I lost my soul and I had to ask him to help me find it? Chow Kefi suddenly giggled, and her plump red lips spat out 2 heart-wrenching words. Enemy? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly saw a cold wind blowing in the ward, and the curtains on the balcony were raised high. This gust of cold wind blew up the curtains like a cold current and rushed toward Chow Kefi. At this moment, Chow Kefi only felt that her whole body was ice cold. It was as if something had drilled into her body. It was as if there was a hook that was trying to hook the soul in her body and was desperately pulling it out. This feeling was exactly the same as what Chow Kefi had experienced in Dihao. She opened her mouth wide and wanted to shout and struggled desperately, but all the strength in her body disappeared at this moment. Chow Kefi's heart was cold. She thought in horror, who on earth wants to kill me? Who did I offend? As soon as this thought popped up in her mind, she suddenly felt as if she was floating in the air. She was able to look down at her body sitting on the hospital bed. Then there was a sudden fierce fighting sound in front of her hospital bed, as if there were 2 invisible people fighting fiercely. The 2 people were fighting so fiercely that the surrounding air was shaking. Chow Kefi thought faintly, is Li Yundong protecting me? If it is him, why doesn't he show up? As soon as this thought came to her mind, she heard a loud and low mantra of the Buddha. Hey? This shout was really like the evening drum and morning bell, like the sound of a great bell ringing on a great river in the dead of winter, or like the solemn and dignified chanting of Buddha in a quiet and lonely empty mountain. This sound shocked Chow Kefi's soul. She could feel that there seemed to be an invisible hand in the air around her, pulling her soul again and letting her slowly float back to her body. When Chow Kefi's soul returned, she opened her eyes again and saw Li Yundong standing in front of her bed like a mountain, as if he was an insurmountable mountain. Li Yundong's hands flew up and down, quickly pinching 2 fixed fundamental seals and the Buddha's seal. He slapped them toward a place where there was no one in front of him. With a muffled bang, a person seemed to be sent flying by him in an instant and hit the wall, shaking the room. Then the person appeared. It was Yen Fong. Yen Fong's hair was disheveled, and blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth. She looked at Li Yundong in shock and said loudly, "This is impossible. How could you come back so quickly?" Li Yundong snorted and said in a deep voice, "Yen Fong, today is your last day. I advise you to hand over the Emperor's clock and release Ao Wushuang. Otherwise, I will destroy your body and soul." When Yen Fong heard Li Yundong's words, her body suddenly shook, and she quickly understood the key point. She said bitterly, "I actually fell into your trap. The one beside Ziyuan is a dummy, right?" Li Yundong said, "Yes." Yen Fong said angrily, "I didn't expect to fall into your hands." Good. Li Yundong sneered and said, "Why on earth do you have to kill Chow Kefi? How did she offend you?" Yen Fong burst out laughing. "Her? When did she offend me? It's just that she has a sinful body, so she must die." Li Yundong said angrily, "T. What sinful body? What sin has she committed? Tell me." Yen Fong laughed and said, "Li Yundong, when you participate in the Taoist assembly, you will understand everything." After that, she moved and rushed out of the window like lightning. The flying speed of the yang spirit was the fastest, and it was impossible for the physical body to catch up. Li Yundong was very clear about this, so he immediately shouted loudly. The yang spirit instantly went out of his body and chased after her like a shadow. At this time, there was silence in the ward. Although Chow Kefi knew that Li Yundong wanted to use her as bait to lure out the real murderer, she had never expected that she would witness such a scene that was like a magic movie. She had originally thought that what she had seen from Li Yundong before was incredible enough, but she had not expected that what she had seen today would completely subvert her understanding. Just as she was in a daze, Chow Kefi's cell phone suddenly rang again. She came to her senses, picked up her cell phone and glanced at it. It was a text message from Lu Feier. "Sister Chow, why haven't you replied for so long? What are you doing? I'm so bored in the crew." Chow Kefi's expression was dull as she casually sent a text message back. "Feier, come with the director to see God." To quickly find this site, please search on Baidu's Sanlian Literature website. Chapter 435. Go to WatchNet. Li Yundong's body stayed in the ward, but the Yang spirit followed Yen Fang like a shadow. WatchNet. 7 km. At this time he had already cultivated to the top realm of the Yang spirit. The body of the Yang spirit could change at will. As soon as he thought of it, the Yang spirit transformed into an immovable wisdom king with 3 heads and 6 arms. His 6 arms kept pinching Mahamudra, like a moving fort, chasing after Yen Fang and bombarding her. At first, Yen Fang threw out a few talismans and summoned the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in an attempt to stop Li Yundong. But as soon as she summoned these heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, Li Yundong immediately slapped them with a fierce Mahamudra. It was like Mount Tai pressing down, immediately smashing these heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. When Yen Fang saw that these heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals had been smashed into pieces, she couldn't help but be shocked. She paused for a moment and saw Li Yunyang's Samadhi Vajra seal coming toward her. Yen Fang subconsciously dodged, and the astral wind of the Mahamudra brushed past her back. Although Yen Fang was a Yang spirit body, she still felt as if her back had been whipped by a steel whip. It was a burning pain. This was merely a graze from the astral wind, and it was already so painful. What would happen if this giant palm were to hit his body? If Yen Fang had a magical item in her hand, she could still fight with Li Yundong. But at this time she was empty-handed and had run out of talismans. How could she resist Li Yundong's extremely powerful Yang spirit true body? Yen Fang's heart was pounding with fear. She didn't dare to stay any longer. As she fled frantically, she shouted, "Li Yundong, you little B*****, don't you want to know where Ao Wushuang is?" Li Yundong sneered and said, "As long as I catch you, I have plenty of ways to make you talk." Yen Fang was furious. She gritted her teeth and said, "You will regret it, Li Yundong. You will definitely regret it." Li Yunyang didn't answer. He just stared at Yen Fang like lightning. His Yang spirit flew quickly and kept a close eye on Yen Fang's figure. It was night time and the two of them were flying in the air like 2 beams of cyan light. The cyan light transformed from Li Yundong's Yang spirit emitted a burst of golden light from time to time. These rays of light sometimes chased after each other, and sometimes entangled together, emitting a dazzling brilliance. After fighting with Li Yundong for a while, Yen Fang was shocked to find that she couldn't get rid of Li Yundong's pursuit at all. No matter how long she could run, Li Yundong could chase her. Yen Fang gritted her teeth and quickly descended, flying toward her residence in the new Riverside district. Seeing that Yen Fang had suddenly fled home, Li Yundong was furious and shouted, "Yen Fang, I've already set up a trap at home. Do you want to go back and court death?" Yen Fang paused slightly as if she was frightened by Li Yundong's words, but she quickly accelerated again and rushed into Li Yundong's residence like lightning. Li Yundong shouted and made 3 Mahamudra in a row, blocking all of Yen Fang's paths. However, Yen Fang didn't dodge. As if she didn't notice the Mahamudra behind her, she still rushed straight to her residence. But when she was still 100 or 200 meters away from her residence, Li Yundong's Mahamudra caught up with her and slapped her heavily on the back. Yen Fang screamed, and her Yang spirit body was instantly torn apart, turning into countless tiny cyan lights and quickly rushing into her residence. Li Yundong also rushed into the house like a shadow. At this time, the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were watching TV in the living room. They saw a flash of cyan light, and countless tiny rays of light went straight to Chao Yi's room. Before they could react, they saw Li Yundong suddenly rush in and go straight to Chao Yi's room with a murderous look. Like a rampaging beast, Li Yundong smashed open the door of Chao Yi's room. He took a look inside and saw that the French windows of Chao Yi's bedroom were open. The curtains were fluttering in the west wind, but there was no one in the room. The little foxes watched in a daze as Li Yundong kicked open Chao Yi's room with a bang. He took a look inside, then turned his head and said coldly, "Where's your Chao Yi Sherbua?" The little foxes were so frightened by Li Yundong that they couldn't speak. Lu Yuehong, who was sitting with them, boldly asked, "Leader, what happened?" Hasn't Sixth Shimmy been meditating and practicing qi in her room? Li Yundong pointed to the empty room and said coldly, you said she was practicing qi. Where is she? Lu Yuehong was frightened by Li Yundong's expression, which seemed to be about to eat someone. She stammered, isn't Sixth Shimmy here? Maybe she has something to do? Li Yundong said in a cold voice, what could she be doing at this time? Lu Yuehong stammered and couldn't say anything. Li Yundong's eyes swept over everyone's faces in the room like a knife. He asked coldly, where is Zhuang Yiting Sherbua? Where is she? As soon as Li Yundong's voice fell, he saw the door of Zhuang Yiting's room open with a creak. The enchanting and coquettish Sherbua of the Fox Zen school, who was wearing pajamas, yawned and walked out. She asked sleepily, what's wrong? What happened? Li Yundong stared at her like lightning for a long time, then asked coldly, Third Sherbua, have you been sleeping in your room all this time? Zhuang Yiting said with a strange expression, of course. Li Yundong narrowed his eyes slightly, and his gaze was so sharp that it seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. He asked in a deep voice, who can testify? Zhuang Yiting smiled slightly and said, everyone here can testify. I've been in my room all this time and haven't come out. Li Yundong turned his head and looked at the silly foxes in the living room. When the little foxes saw Li Yundong looking at them, they immediately nodded. Li Yundong nodded slightly. He snorted coldly and asked, do you know where Chao Yi went? Zhuang Yiting was stunned. I don't know. But she quickly asked tentatively, Leader, what happened? Lu Yuehong, who had been keeping a low profile in the Fox Zen school, was also keenly aware that when Li Yundong addressed Chao Yi, he no longer called her Sherbua Chao Yi. Instead, he called her by her name. This had never happened since Li Yundong took over as the leader. Oh no, something must have happened. An ominous thought suddenly flashed through Lu Yuehong's mind. She stood up and asked, Leader, what happened? Li Yundong's sharp eyes swept over them, and his eyes were full of suspicion and suspicion. His cold eyes made the little foxes shudder, and they shivered in their hearts. At this time, Su Chan, who had heard the noise, came out of her room. She rubbed her eyes and said in confusion, Yundong, what happened? Hearing Su Chan's voice, Li Yundong turned his head. When his cold eyes fell on the little girl, they gradually became soft and warm. Li Yundong closed his eyes and sighed slowly. After a while, he opened his eyes and said, there's a traitor in our Fox Zen school. The little foxes were shocked. A traitor? Who is it? Lu Yuehong was also shocked. Leader, who are you talking about? Do you have any real evidence? However, Zhuang Yiting's face was full of sarcasm. She snorted coldly and said, Leader, now the truth has come to light, hasn't it? I've long said that Chao Yi is a traitor. Li Yundong's face darkened and he didn't speak, but Lu Yuehong's face was full of anxiety. She glared at Zhuang Yiting and shouted, Third Shiji, how can you say that? How could Sixth Shiji be a traitor? Zhuang Yiting smiled coldly and looked at Li Yundong. She said, Leader has already made a conclusion in his heart. Listen to him. Li Yundong looked at the panicked little foxes. He saw that these little foxes, who were usually carefree, were now looking at him in panic, with doubts and worries in their eyes. Li Yundong sighed and waved to the little foxes, motioning for them to sit down. Then he waved to Su Chan, motioning for her to sit down beside him. After they were all seated, Li Yundong sighed softly and said, Sherbua Zhuang Yiting is right. Chao Yi is indeed a traitor of our Fox Zen school. Or rather, she is no longer the Sherbua Chao Yi you know. She is just a traitor with Chao Yi's physical body, but the yang spirit of her soul is someone else's. Lu Yuehong's body swayed slightly, and her face suddenly turned pale. She had grown up with Chao Yi. Although they were not sisters, they were as close as sisters. At this time, hearing Li Yundong's words, it was like a shocking lightning strike. She said in a trembling voice, Leader, what did you say? Who is possessing Sixth Shiji? Li Yundong looked at her sympathetically. It's Yin Fong. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. The little foxes were so shocked that they all stood up, their hair standing on end. They couldn't believe Li Yundong's words, but the facts were right in front of them, so they had to believe it. The little foxes clearly remembered that it was Yin Fong who had killed their powerful little Sherbua Yi Yu in Mount Tianlong. It was also Yin Fong who had planned the plan to destroy the Fox Zen school. If it hadn't been for Li Yundong's sudden appearance, the Fox Zen school would have been wiped out by all the major sects. To them, Yin Fong was not only the name of a mortal enemy, but also a nightmarish name. None of them had expected that Mo Ashi, the Shiji they respected the most in the Fox Zen school, was actually Yin Fong. And now Chao Yi, who had been with them day and night, was actually Yen Fang again. This was really terrifying. But what was even more terrifying was that Yen Fang had escaped again. For a moment, the little foxes all thought, since Yen Fang can attach herself to Chao Yi Shibwa, then she can definitely attach herself to me, and in the future she can also attach herself to other Shiji and Shimi. In an instant, the little foxes looked at each other with suspicion and vigilance, as if the most familiar person around them would become the terrible Yen Fang in the next second. Seeing that the little foxes were all suspicious and wary, Li Yundong frowned secretly and said, "You don't have to worry. Yen Fang's yang spirit has been seriously injured by me. Even if she escapes, she won't be able to come out and do evil for a while. If she still wants to live, she will definitely recuperate for a period of time." Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, "Moreover, the reason why Yen Fang was able to possess Chao Yi is probably because Chao Yi was once alone in Mount Tianlong, which gave Yen Fang the opportunity to take advantage of her. From today on, none of you can be alone. In this way, Yen Fang will definitely not dare to act rashly." Only then did the little foxes feel a little relieved, but they all frowned and looked worried. Some of them couldn't help but choke up and say, "Chao Yi Shibwa was fine. How could she have become that evil Yen Fang?" As soon as someone cried, the others couldn't help but follow suit. Immediately, someone whimpered and echoed, "Leader, you have to avenge Chao Yi Shibwa." Lu Yuehong also burst into tears. She knelt down in front of Li Yundong and said tearfully, "Leader, I know that you are powerful. You will definitely be able to find Yen Fang and avenge 6th Shimi." Li Yundong sighed and reached out to help her up. "You don't have to do this. As the leader of the sect, I also have a lot of responsibility for what happened in the sect. You don't have to say anything about this matter. I will definitely give you an explanation. From today on, I, Li Yundong, will chase Yen Fang to the end." Zhuang Yiting gritted her teeth and said hatefully, "Leader, if there's anything you need, just tell me." Li Yunyang nodded at her and sighed softly. "You all go to rest. The tea house will open as usual tomorrow. No matter what, this thorn in our flesh has finally been pulled out. We can live a stable and leisurely life for a while." After hearing Li Yundong's words, the little foxes wiped their tears and went to their rooms. Lu Yuehong and Zhuang Yiting also said goodbye and went into their rooms. Seeing that everyone around had left, Su Chan's face was full of sadness. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Yundong, Yen Fang ran away again. I'm afraid she won't show up again this time. Will we not be able to find my master's whereabouts?" Li Yundong gently stroked her black hair and said softly, "No, I'm sure that Yen Fang will definitely appear at the Taoist assembly. Although her yang spirit comes and goes very quickly, I have already found a way to deal with her." Su Chan raised her head and looked at Li Yundong with tears in her big black eyes. She choked with doubt and said doubtfully, "Are you serious?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course. Jinren doesn't lie." The little girl wiped her tears and said with a smile, "Then I believe you." Li Yundong stroked the little girl's long hair lovingly with one hand and put the other hand behind his back. He looked meaningfully at the endless night outside the windowsill and said slowly, "Chaner, just watch. It will definitely be a very lively Taoist assembly. Sorry, I just got home. There's still one more night to go. Vote for recommendation previous page, return to table of contents, next page error report. If you like it, please click here to add Keeping a Vixen at Home to your bookshelf so that you can read the latest chapters and updates in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Vixen at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 436. Go to WatchNet. When Ziyuan returned to her residence, Li Yundong had already been waiting in the living room for a long time. Go to WatchNet? The young and handsome leader was sitting on the sofa in the living room like a statue, quietly thinking about something. When Ziyuan saw Li Yundong, she immediately asked, "How is it? Have you found second Shibwa?" Li Yundong raised his eyes, looked at her and said, "I found her. It's Chao Yi." Ziyuan was slightly shocked. "It's really her? Where is she?" Li Yundong sighed softly and frowned. "She ran away." Ziyuan was shocked. "She ran away again? This is not good." Li Yundong looked worried. He pondered for a while and said, "The only thing I'm glad about now is that before Yen Fang escaped, I used Mahamudra to seriously injure her yang spirit body. Although she has escaped now, she can't do evil for a while." Ziyuan couldn't help asking, "Then have you figured out why second Shibwa has to kill Chao Kefi?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "The only thing I can be sure of is that Yen Fang will definitely show up again. What we need to do now is to think of a way to capture the yang spirit of a cultivator. Otherwise, the next time she shows up, it will be useless if we can't catch her yang spirit. Ziyuan frowned. She looked around and winked at Li Yundong. Li Yundong understood. The two of them went to the open space on the roof. After making sure that there was no one around, Ziyuan said softly, "You should know Zhang Buoduan, one of the 5 ancestors of Taoism in the south." Li Yundong nodded. "I know. You mentioned him before. He is the great master of the south sect of Jindan sect, who advocates dual cultivation of life and death. He is also the founder of the Ziyang sect of Taoism." Ziyuan nodded slightly and said, "In Zhang Buoduan's Wuzhen chapter, there is a saying, 'Don't know the confusion in the mystery, but know that it is good to plant lotuses in the fire. Bring the white tiger home to raise and give birth to a pearl like the full moon. Watch the fire of the medicine furnace, but calm the mind and let nature take its course. When the group of Yin is peeled, the elixir matures, and jumps out of the cage and lives for 10,000 years. You can be considered an expert in the cultivation world now. You should know what this cultivation poem means, right?" Li Yundong was a little puzzled as to why Ziyuan had suddenly started talking about cultivation poems from a place that was thousands of miles away from the topic, but he still replied, "I know. The first 2 sentences of this poem refer to the kung fu of cultivators in the foundation establishment phase. Refining Niden in the Dantian real fire is like refining lotus seeds. The last 2 sentences refer to the skill of refining Niden after the Zhuji phase, and the last sentence refers to when a cultivator's Yin spirit is cultivated to a certain level, Niden will completely mature and be cultivated to the top level, that is, the Yangshan phase. Once a person reaches the Yangshan phase, he can jump out of the cage and be free from the shackles of birth, old age, sickness and death. He can live as long as 10,000 years and live as long as heaven." Ziyuan smiled with slight admiration and said, "That's right. You are also a person who has cultivated to the Yangshan phase. Since you understand the cultivation principle of the Yangshan, you should know that the Yangshan is the sublimation of the divine qi after it is mixed. The virtual spirit has no substance, but it has a body that is useful. When it is gathered, it will take shape, and when it is scattered, it will become qi. If you want to capture the yang spirit of a person in such a realm, it will be more difficult than ascending to heaven. Unless..." Li Yundong was a little discouraged at first, but when he heard the last part, he became spirited again and quickly asked, "Unless what?" Ziyuan thought for a moment, hesitated for a moment, then said, "Unless there is a special magical item and a special magic circle." Li Yundong asked, "What special magical item and magic circle?" Ziyuan said, "In fact, you have seen this magical item before. It is the burning thumb pot that Du Fei wanted to exchange with you for the Renyuan Jindan." Li Yundong was slightly surprised. "The burning thumb pot? You mean the magical item of Taoism?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "That's right. This is a very powerful and famous magical item of Buddhism. In fact, Du Fei was also very cunning to exchange it with you. Because he is a Taoist cultivator, he can't use Buddhist magical items, so he sold this magical item to you at a low price. Holding this magical item is tantamount to throwing a bright pearl into the dark, and it is easy to attract the covetous eyes of Buddhist cultivation masters. But if this magical item falls into your hands, it will definitely be like adding wings to a tiger." Li Yundong said curiously, "After talking for a long time, you still haven't told me what this magical item is used for. How can it capture the yang spirit of a cultivator?" Ziyuan laughed and said, "The burning thumb pot is a powerful magical item that Fahai used to subdue demons. When it is taken out, not only can it release a powerful Buddhist power to deter demons and evil qi, but it can also capture the spiritual qi between heaven and earth. In the past, Fahai relied on the burning thumb pot to deter demons and evil qi, as well as the characteristics of capturing the spiritual qi between heaven and earth. That's how he was able to subdue the 1,000-year-old white snake." Li Yundong couldn't help but ask, "Didn't Du Fei say last time that this was a romance? Why does it sound like it's a serious matter?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "The legend of the white snake is a romance that portrays Fahai as the villain. But in fact, in the history of the cultivation world, Fahai is a famous demon exorcist. During the Tianbao years of Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang dynasty, Prime Minister Pei Xiu wrote a poem at that time. The poem said, 'Sending a son into the void with sorrow, one should plant good roots after a long time.' This poem is about his son, Fahai. Therefore, his son, Fahai, is also known as Pei Tuchuo, and these records are quoted from the southern Tang monk Yingzhi's Tuchuo rock records. Jinshan used to be called Fuyu because Pei Tuchuo obtained gold in the river. In the 21st year of Zhen Yuan, Tang, Commander Li Qi reported to the court and gave it the name Jinshan. At the same time, the Jinshan annals also recorded, the Python Cave on the side of the right peak is steep and dangerous, about 4 or 5 feet deep. In the past, a white python appeared to bite people, and Pei Tuchuo subdued it and obtained the gold to rebuild the blue. The Song dynasty poet Zhang Xiangying wrote a poem, "Half a stone room is a meditation place and it is not easy to gain fame." The white python turned into a dragon and returned to the sea, leaving the old Tuchuo in the rock. Speaking of this, Ziyuan said with a smile, "From this, it can be seen that the matter of Fahai subduing the white snake is true." Li Yundong watched as Ziyuan recounted these historical allusions as if they were her family treasures. She was really knowledgeable, which was amazing. He secretly sighed at Ziyuan's erudition and said, "I see. The yang spirit is a spirit body, and its spiritual qi is extremely powerful. The burning thumb pot has the power to capture the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, so as long as the yang spirit gets close to it, the spiritual qi of the yang spirit will be automatically absorbed?" Ziyuan nodded and praised, "Yes, that's right. However, relying on the burning thumb pot alone is not enough, because the spiritual qi between heaven and earth is often very loose and thin, so it is naturally easy to capture. The evil qi of those demons is also naturally restrained by the Buddhist power of the burning thumb pot, so their spiritual qi is also easy to capture. However, the yang spirit of a cultivator is an extremely powerful spiritual energy body. There is not a trace of evil qi in its body, so it is naturally not restrained by the burning thumb pot. Moreover, the energy of the yang spirit is often condensed and vigorous. It is really difficult to rely on the magic power of the burning thumb pot to capture it. Even if you use all your strength, there is no guarantee that you will be able to capture the opponent's yang spirit." Li Yundong asked again, "Is there any other way?" Ziyuan said, "Yes." Li Yundong asked, "What is it?" Ziyuan said, "The last time you broke into Shiyuan Temple by mistake, you broke a magic formation and let 2 golden snakes escape. Do you remember?" Li Yundong's eyes lit up. "Ah, you mean?" Ziyuan nodded. "That's right. The magic formation you broke last time was the Bafang demon subduing formation of Buddhism. This magic formation has an extremely powerful confinement effect. As long as the cultivation of the cultivator operating the magic formation is not more than double that of the people entering the formation, it is enough to confine the other party." Li Yundong suddenly understood and said, "I see. As long as we lure Yanfang into this Bafang demon subduing formation and then use the burning thumb pot to extract her spiritual qi, she can only be captured?" Ziyuan nodded slightly. "That's right." Li Yundong clapped his hands and said loudly, "Well, I'll go find Du Fei now, and then I'll go find Master Purin of Shiyuan Temple. I'll exchange the heavenly Jindan technique with Du Fei for the burning thumb pot. 1 for 1. I believe he will do it. Moreover, Master Purin of Shiyuan Temple is righteous and will definitely help." Seeing Li Yundong speak confidently, Ziyuan suddenly hesitated for a moment and said, "Li Yundong, can I ask you something?" Li Yundong had known Ziyuan for a while. He had always been the one asking for help from her, but he had never seen her beg him. He suddenly shivered and said seriously, "Ziyuan, just ask. As long as I can do it, I will definitely do it." Ziyuan's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, and her heart was in turmoil. It could be said that she had watched Li Yundong grow up bit by bit from a layman. At first he was just a reckless boy and she didn't like him at all. But now the speed of Li Yundong's growth was extremely astonishing. Even when her Sherbwa saw him, she didn't dare to fight him and ran away in a panic. Ziyuan knew that her idea was tantamount to putting a noose around Yanfang's neck. All that was left was for Yanfang to deliver herself to Li Yundong. Then as soon as Li Yundong twisted the rope, Yanfang would not be able to escape. Although Ziyuan believed that Yanfang had entered the devil's way and was blinded by hatred, she still couldn't bear it. After all, she was her Sherbwa. Ziyuan said softly, "Li Yundong, can you promise me that if Yanfang is willing to let go of her past grievances and hand over Ao Wushuang, can you let her go?" Although Li Yundong had already guessed what Ziyuan wanted to say, he still hesitated when he heard this. After a while, he raised his eyes and said seriously, "Ziyuan, you can be said to be half a teacher of mine. If I really catch Yanfang and she is willing to give up and hand over Ao Wushuang, I can let her go. This is also a repayment for your kindness." Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "Then I thank you on behalf of the Lingong sect. No matter what, she is my Sherbwa." I appreciate your kindness very much if you are willing to let her go. Li Yundong smiled and said, however, I think she is a person who will not give up until she sees the coffin. She is very likely not to give up. Ziyuan was worried and frowned slightly. Then there's no other way. This is her life and also the life of our Lingong sect. Li Yundong saw that Ziyuan was unhappy and frowned, as if she was holding his heart. For no reason, his heart suddenly softened. He sighed and said, forget it. As long as she is willing to hand over Ao Wushuang, whether she repents or not, I will let her go. But only this time, there will be no next time. Ziyuan knew that the grudge between Yen Fang and the Fox Zen school was very deep. It could be said that Li Yundong had made the biggest concession by doing this. She was moved for a moment and said softly, thank you. The two of them looked at each other and then quickly dodged each other. It was like two small sparks suddenly colliding in the dark night, arousing a little light and then quickly dimming. Li Yundong felt that the atmosphere was a little wrong at this time. He coughed dryly and quickly changed the topic. By the way, I have another very important thing to trouble you with. Ziyuan had been worried that Li Yundong and her Sherbo would fight to the death. She was in the middle and felt uncomfortable. At this time, with Li Yundong's promise, she suddenly felt as if a big stone had been lifted from her heart and she felt much more relaxed. She smiled slightly and said softly, as quiet and beautiful as an autumn leaf, Immortal Li, I will do whatever you want me to do. Alas, when I returned to Suzhou today I was exhausted, it was really tiring. Mother-in-law still needs to be operated on the 14th, and then I will have to go to Shanghai to take care of her. I will try to make up for it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. See that you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.